And at the beginning of all, we are presented with a VR game of fantasy that contemplates action, romance, and world. And your name is Chronolife. In this, the game begins with a woman refusing a man in her group, saying that they do not accept inexperienced hunters. So a boy acts more harsh with the subject and states that his equipment is garbage, and he, in turn, notes that he is completely screwed in that game. And it starts to curse a lot on Twitter. And seeing him insisted, the hunters deduce that the player is only outraged that he was not accepted in his hunting group. In this, the player keeps complaining and says his weaponry is very good. After all, he spent a note on his sword. And in all this confusion, a girl goes to him and calls him to hunt together. In this, the player changes his mind, tells Chronolife, and says the game is awesome, and halfway, the boy tells her that he spent a lot in the game, buying several packages of 50-5000 sword beginners. He says she also came from a package, and this girl is even more surprised by him, and says the young man learns to be a hero who only finds himself in fairy tales. Seeing this, he gets emotional, and begins to think of them two marrying and having children. And moving on later, the girl says they already arrived at the place they needed, but when looking around, he notes that he is still in the middle of the forest and plays herself. It's struck by the girl out of nowhere, so he suggests that she's wanting to steal her weapon, but she says she doesn't need an item as bad as his. In this case, her goal was simply to attract him to that deserted forest to kill him. And hearing that, he keeps not believing, and asks if the story of the home group was a lie. In this, the girl says yes, and ensures that she would never make a group having him as her ally. After all, she considers him a great loser. He is also a loser in real life, as he can barely talk to her right. That said, she suggests that he enhances the equipment more when he receives some changed, because if he cannot control his right weaponry, he should at least remembering be good. That he bought the starting warrior ensemble. She deduces that the boy's parents are just beggars, and upon hearing this last insult, the boy gets up and says that she has gone over all the boundaries. In this, she leaves him in half. Then the girl reaches the conditions to activate the transition to the hidden class, a class called as God of Life. In this, the girl explains that she already killed the 1,000 people she needed. Therefore, she just needs to leave for the final mission. While the dead player, he learns that in that game what prevails is the jungle law. After that, he loses an expressive amount of experience and reappears in the safe area. Then he begins to reflect on all the humiliation he has passed earlier and decides to improve his sword on his own. But in the middle of the process, it is the half and half, failing to improve your equipment. In this, he tries to improve his iron blood leather gloves, but in the end, he also destroys the equipment, and so he loses everything he had and again says that the game is garbage and that a twig falls in his lap. On the armament description, he finds that the twig is a basic gun for beginners, and so it is very weak. Then he simply ignores her, and then he comes across the responsible for playing that item there. And it deduces that the player wants to give him this twig, because he apparently got sorry to see him breaking all the equipment. In this, he wonders what a fart is. That is still shit, and begins to improve the twig, and can soon afterwards, but instead of being happy, he regrets only being able to improve a useless twig. But as he hammers the item, he gradually improving each time more. The two-player with the twig will break at some point. After all, the more the item is improved, the greater the chance of failure. However, he is all afternoon improving the equipment, without destroying, until suddenly the twig is improved to the maximum, reaching at 90-9 level. And that makes the player confused. After all 10 improvements, the chance to succeed next time falls to less than 5%. And by feeling even more suspicious, he decides to test the weaponry. In this, he hits the stick on the floor and causes a gigantic abyss. The work is felt even from space. In this, the people around confuse this attack with the flames of a dragon. But when analyzing the situation, they notice that the continent was simply divided into two. And from that day, the player managed to hit a record at VR games and even win a Guinness. And the record he hit is referring to the largest number of players who took on kill at the same time. In this case, more than 850,000 players. And after conquering this feat, he remembers the disdain of everyone around him and states that he will teach everyone that in that game, what matters is the law of the jungle. And by reflecting more on himself, he feels as an Ingwam, because besides having a common appearance and height, he also does not stand out in studies or in sports. As he walks around town, he ends up bumping into another player. In this, the guy takes him by the shirt and threatens to kill him. So his wife asks to leave it there, because she thinks he is scaring the rookie. But instead of showing concern about that situation, he curses the player, making him even more pistol. Then he hits a scam on the player with his branch, which ends the guy on time. And his wife is left behind, amazed at what he sees. And then, the proto notes that the durability of your weapon is coming to an end. And when seeing in this situation, he falls back grumbling. After all, he had only given 2 blows with the branch. And yet, the durability of the gun fell to 3, which means that he will only have 3 more blows to the gun. And although he feels that he is completely screwed, the Prota follows firmly with his plan to end all those who despised him, including that girl who took her life. He remembers that there are only 3 more attacks left, and notes that he will need to use them with a lot of responsibility when arriving at a place called Vale dos the Dead. Prota meets Chronolife's strongest boss, in this case, the 2-headed dragon, Urus. In this, the monster states that he has come to the crossroads where life and death intercepate, and states that he will make him tremble with despair before killing him. However, Prota uses one of his last 3 attacks on Gold, and says he will use them all to defeat the strongest monster of the whole game. However, Urus asks the boy to wait a while, and politely calls him Ryugnan, and listen to that protest the sudden change in the monster's posture, and he reminds him that Gold was just second, and calling him a deadly fool. In this, the monster says he was just following his programming script, so he asks who the boy really is. However, the Prota only tells him to silence his mouth and die soon. In this, he uses one more of his attacks on the monster, and so, just another attack is left, until the durability is over for good. In this, Prota complains loudly about your problem, and hear that the boy is facing the problem against the durability of his weapon. Urus says he can help him, then he proposes to donate his soul to the boy. However, the Prota is not understanding what exactly is that. In this, Dragon asks if the boy has heard of Ego Sword. However, the boy still does not understand anything, so Urus simplifies the meaning of an Ego Sword, saying it will infuse Ryung's weapon with his soul, and with that, the boy's weapon will have an ego, which will allow her to evolve into an Ego Sword, and thus, Ryung's equipment will have an infinite durability. And seeing that, the boy is surprised. However, Urus compliments the explanation, saying that the Ego Sword is the strongest weapon in Corona life. In this, Prot begins to laugh alone, because if things follow this pace, your revenge can still happen. And for him, this coincidence is so great that the Prota feels that the destination itself wants to see him avenging himself. The boy decides to make the contract without even thinking much, and after pressing the accepting button, the body of the URU dragon disappears immediately, and then his soul fuses to Ryug's weapon, making it a Rankigo weapon with infinite durability. Just as the dragon had promised and done the contract, the UROS army begins to mobilize to help Ryan in its revenge. In this, the boy raises his new gun up, and promises to consummate his revenge against all those who humiliated him. And the next day, all of the guild are informed about the issuance of a SSS ranking reward, whose target is a player that killed more than 800,000 people in a single day. In this, the guard explains that the poster of this target is spread over 12 kingdoms and 3 continents, and in this case, the reward is 1 billion gold. And hear that, everyone goes crazy. Then a group of guards marches toward the scene. In analyzing the symbol in their armor, a hunter notes that are the real guards. In this, they make room for the sacred guild master, Sintra, and beyond them, the 10 knights of elite, stronger named as the cross lineage, also go to the place. Next to their master, a man named Serrero. Then comes a woman named Abracadabra, the strongest witch in the royal family, from the Santa Guild. And then Hong also appears there, and presents himself as the master of the robbery guild Robin Hood. And finally, the king of the Castle Arden, the master of the Guild of Justice, also goes to the place. And so, the top 5 of guilds gather in one place, and form the first alliance among 5 best guilds in the world. In this, the king of Arden Castle declares war to Ryung on behalf of the World Union Guild, and calls him the killer player idiot. While he laughs at his luck, he is surprised by a being that comes to the tip of the base. In this, Ryung asks what that thing is. Then the creature claims to be Urus and explains again that now her soul is linked to his sword. In addition, Urus informs that he is the only one who can see and hear him. Then Ryung is strange that Urus is only one head. And when he heard that, Urus notes that Ryung is right. However, he also doesn't know where his other head went. While Ryung, he notices a strange poster on the floor. As he caught him, he finds that they are looking for him as a bad guy. In this, the Euro is excited to see that his master killed more than 800,000 people. After all, he didn't expect less from the young man. In analyzing the reward of 1 billion gold that are putting in his head, Urus explains that this 1 billion is also real money. Of this, Ryung asks the dragon how he is able to use the real money term, even though he's just a game of the game. After all, this is the kind of comment that only other players would do. And Ryung deduces that one was going to speak non-game related phrases would be a violation. Furus, in turn, states that he no longer cares about anything. After all, he is already dead. In this, he notices that the boy will certainly be chased by players from around the world due to the high reward they put in his head. So Urus asks what he intends to do about it. And Ryung says he doesn't feel threatened by this situation, because it's like he was a celebrity now. Then Ryung says he will need to go from PF. In this, Urus asks what this word means, and Proto explains that PF. It is a loser acronym hiding its strength, which as its name suggests, is when a very strong person pretends to be a failed to hide his true strength. Seeing this implication, Urus asks why Ryung would do something like that.
After all, that would make others think he is a weakness and consequently would ignore him.
However, Ryung says doing this will be a lot of fun. Therefore, Urus should only wait and observe his next steps. And Hyung explains that he can really appear to be a weakness in the eyes of others, but he still remains the protagonist of the story. For him, this is very cool to do. But in the middle of the conversation, he ends up taking an arrow from behind that throws him to the floor at the same time. The shooter is presented as the Fulcao's Eye, the supreme commander of the Union of the Five Guilds. Then all the other guards leave the attack as well, and the Fulcao Eye orders everyone to tie Ryung on behalf of the supreme Union commander of the Five Guilds. And hear the call. The guards are willing to obey him on time. So Urus notes his master on the floor without being able to get up, and tells him to stand immediately, because even those humans are weak, Hyung will have problems if they come. Then Ryung begins to get up as he spits blood, and his hawk eye sends his men to keep attacking him, so as not to give his time even breathing. While Ryung, he decides to remove what he said about living hiding his true strength, and claims that they themselves made him take this attitude. Prota hits the floor with his branch, causing a huge explosion that reaches the atmosphere of the planet. And with that, he immobilizes all his enemies at once. However, Fulcao's Eye is still standing and confusing what has just happened. For with only one blow, the target made a gigantic damage, overthrowing the entire capital of the First Kingdom along with his troops. Then Ryung stops in front of Fulcao's Eye, which in turn uses an invocation crystal to call all members of the Union immediately. In this, the place is surrounded by several guards of all guilds. Then the supreme commander of the Union of the Five Guilds orders everyone to attack Ryung. In this, the boy continues to kill everyone with several blows of that thing. However, Urus is still concerned about that situation. After all, even the boss Urus being very strong, he is not able to deal with thousands of people at once. In addition, Yuri recognizes that the World Union Guild is not an easy opponent, as it is formed by a group of ranks around the world, and so, he believes he would lose a fight against Yilda, even if he mobilized his entire army. But still, Ryung continues in combat, overthrowing his enemies one by one, until suddenly the witch Abracadabra leaves the attack as well, and throws a disintegration spell called Ancestral Magic of Destruction. While the spell goes towards Ryung, it is perplexed with how fucking it is the name of that spell she launched. Then he attacks her back and names her blow like lifting, not to be behind her. And with that, Ryung breaks the witch's ancestral magic, which in turn mobilizes your troops for the next onslaught. But before they could do anything, Ryung attacks them first with one more of his blows, which he genially appoints how to attack. And at the end of the battle, the World Union Guild is completely defeated. In this, Fulcao's Eye is in shock, not believing what has just happened. So Ryung goes to him and says he just didn't kill him before purpose. After all, he wanted to be able to kill him more calmly to take revenge on the arrow he resisted. At the beginning of the battle, and after that, the battle of that day became the most discussed issue among Chrono Life's players. But this battle was also much spoken among other players due to its proportion. Mills, Urus states that the young man is really amazing because he was able to do something so relevant. So Ryung decides to leave the place, but before leaving, he notes that there is still another player view. But he was not an ordinary player, but the girl who humiliated him earlier. Upon arriving in the sunset, he illuminates the 3 million corpses of the members of the Union, and tells the girl ahead. She cynically greets him as if the two were good friends. But for Ryung, that meeting was more dramatic than anything. In this, he remembers when she called her parents, because they don't have money to buy better equipment in the game. And although he was angry before, Ryuji just can't hold back the laugh. While the girl, she asks how he is. And he says that the destination probably united them there. However, Hing says he already knew they were looking for from the beginning. And he says he would just like to destroy her soon. However, there is something he wants to talk before. Then Ryung asks if she dye her hair, because she has a different color from before. In this, she is happy that he realized this change in his look. Then he talks again about the main subject of that conversation, saying that Soul killed him to change his work. In this case, his new work would be the Goddess of Life, which is only obtained after the individual kills 1,000 people. And because of that, your hair has automatically changed color. I will take into consideration that she needs to kill so many people to achieve her work. And Gue says she should be called the Goddess of Death, and not Goddess of Life. In this, the girl says that this analysis makes everything really hilarious, and Hyung, in turn, gets tired of talking and says they should go to combat, since he finished hearing her story. But when attacked, the girl quickly deflects, and he says he would like to be able to talk to him a little more. However, Ryung insists on continuing the fight, and finally, he can hit her. But after the dust of the attack downloads, Ryung notes that she is still standing, and the girl says he got a little stronger since the last time they saw each other. However, she states that he is not yet able to kill her with this pathetic attack, and that Gold is frightened by the girl's resistance, and she, in turn, faces Gold directly, implying that she is able to see him. While Hyung, he worries only the fact that he has not even been injured by his attack. In this, the girl again says she is the Goddess of Life. Therefore, a mere human could never kill a god. Hearing this, he gets even more annoyed and goes over her again. Then the whole continent begins to tremble with Hyung's attacks, but still the girl still has no scratch, and says it's no use trying to do anything with her. In this, he sighs in hate and she disdain, saying that he probably was all this time thinking of killing her, but as he can see, it will not happen so easily. Then she again tells him not to give up on this, for no matter how long he passes or how strong he stay, Jung will never be able to kill a goddess like her. He turns his back and begins to go somewhere. And with that, she deduces that he has placed himself in his place and give up. However, he explains that he is just analyzing some way to leave the planet in two. After all, as he is not able to kill her, Ryung can at least destroy the planet where she lives. The girl will end up dead with the explosion, or after being thrown into the space. But by hearing all this, the girl says that a mere human is not able to do something like that. But Ryung says she will use all her power in this next blow, but so it will have a greater chance of success. So she asks if he wouldn't die either, if he did that. And Hyung remembers that he practically paid with his life to learn how that game works. He prioritizes only the jungle law, considering that he is already screwed and with nothing to lose. Jung explains to her that she's not caring about anything. In this, the girl begins to take his words seriously and asks him to calm down. However, Hyung continues with his plan to destroy the planet. Meanwhile, in the virtual reality capsule room, a player notes that has just been expelled from Chronolife for some reason. In this, other players start complaining about the same problem simultaneously, so they deduce that it is Tinder to have turned off the switch and start scolding her, but he explains that nothing has been turned off and no energy fell, so players suggest that it occurred, a problem with the server of the game. And after a while, an ad out on the game's official page, saying that there is really a problem to be solved. And the server is connected again, but only Ryung is inside the game. But as he looked around, he turns into an unknown place, until suddenly a face speaks to him and explains that he has just destroyed the SDXXXX planet, which in this case is a fourth universe planet that was known as its beauty, and besides it was your mother's that favorite planet. Place. In this, Jung asks who is that being and simply presents them as God. Proclaiming the God, Hyung says the identity is his, so that's not your problem. However, he asks if he saw a black-haired woman, but then such God says that they only have them two there. And Hyung is amazed, but when he sees the current number of users, he sees that only one person has. So God asks what the problem is. After all, he himself killed everyone. And God says it should be a common sense. After all, he should not expect anyone to survive that explosion. And he says that all living things were eliminated. However, Ryuki starts to laugh, becoming totally happy. After all, your revenge was complete. In this, that sociopath begins to say that he is very happy. And that's why he likes online games so much. And he tries to celebrate with gold, saying that he finally managed to take revenge. However, the branch gives no sign of life. Then he starts cursing the golds, calling him again. However, the god states that, I already told him. They both there. He only has. So he says that this child is also expected to be there. So the boy asks what he is. After all, the current user number is just a person, and asks if he is an NPC or an administrator, but he says he is none of these two. And when he was going to say what's going on, he starts crackle, giving some bugs in his voice. So he thinks someone getting into, and then a light appears among them. And God says that this is disappointing, but everything is okay, because it was great for them to meet, and give it to the boy, telling him to send one hi to the Harry for him. And Hyung is not understanding anything what is going on, asking him to wait, but he is expelled from the game too, and wakes up at Lawn and House. He gets pissed about it, wondering why he appeared then. Question that shit is that Harry. But there is a man with some other men in front of him, and he looks a lot like a gangsta. Then go to Ryung, and asks if his name is Lee Ji-woo, player of 20-1, who was playing Chronolife for 3 months, and his chosen weapon is the 90-9 twist, and he asks if this is correct. And then he recognizes the guy as Harry, and he says he got it right, and asks who he would be, and then he says he's the guy who will steal his twig. In this, Prota introduces himself again, saying that he is an ordinary diverse student who likes to play Chronolife. To tell the truth, until recently, he was just a novice player, but he gave a scam of luck and made a 90-9 level twig. So with that, he filled all the people he doesn't like to be sucking, including even that woman. Then he says that even a man who self-promoted the god appeared and disappeared quickly, but today he is in the middle of a dinner with that weird guy. And he asks what the boy is looking at, sending him to eat soon, because the old woman who manages that store has a way in the kitchen. Then the boy begins to eat and wonders what is happening there. So that man says this is the restaurant of Gukbap that he constantly attended when he was still broken. However, this has been about 15 years. After all, your company was established during the early stages of Chronolife development. So Jaiwa notices who is that guy, and he introduces himself saying that he is the president of Coronalife, Beaten Diakbe. In this, Jaiwu is impressed that he is a president, and not a gangster, and asks who are those guys with him. He says they are the company's workers, and one of it is the character modeler, the other is the director of soundtrack planning, and the other is the leader of the marketing team. And Jewel is very pissed because he thought they were gangsta and took a hell of a fright. He asks why the president of Chronolife would come after him. And then Choi asks if he really doesn't know. After all, he told him there in the capsules, because he came to recover the 90 and the boy is surprised, but he wonders why, how a game company is natural to do, recovering Bogado items. But the boy is surprised by this item Bogado. After all, he himself improved them all. So Joey says 3%. This is the successful chance of success after improving an item 10 times. And of course, after that the chance drops even more. And asks if the boy didn't know that, and he obviously knew. And he says that if he is not a bug, the boy might know to know what is the chance that it happens. And Jaiwoo is silent, and Choi says that from now on, the swim Titanove will be under his care. Then, in the game, near the front city, a level XXI Gauros appears and a group of adventurers stands in position to defeat him. So the monster goes up, but the Paris magician throws a missile of flames on him, burning that monster that starts to scream, and everyone congratulates her saying that she worked, and they plan to try to do it once again. But the warrior who was with them starts to freak out and leaves him alone. And one of the members says she can't go out attacking that way, and she really didn't, because she takes a sapapo and flying, and then it falls on the magician, and they soon realize that they are in trouble, after all the priestess has passed out. Meanwhile, Jihyo keeps looking from above, that deplorable scene, and he obviously gets bored, wondering what he does now, and Urus asks him the same question, but he looks at his twig with a slightly empty look on his face, and he remembers again what he spent with Choi, when he said that from now on his 99 twig will be with him, but he says that this is what the company wanted him to say. However, he doesn't think that fair, and Joe is shocked by that. So Joey says he researched personally and his twig is not a bugged item. Then he came to a conclusion, saying he will no longer interfere with that user, whether he kills the strongest boss in the game, kills 3 million people, or destroying a planet. It is free to do what you want as a user. And he begins to make an analogy about adding one whatever what in the other I don't know what, and says it just depends on him to choose. However, the owner arrives at that moment all tender and gives her a slap on him, telling him not to add that whatever what I don't know what he was eating. Ah bro, sorry if you want to read the name of this dish that you have no idea, nor me, what you have inside. You're kidding me. And she begins to say that he will make her crazy, because what is the sense of making a steak bone soup all night? And he will put that I don't know what inside. And she says she only put that I don't know what in the menu for consideration of him. And she burst. So the two get cabisbake seeing that scene. And in the game he thinks the decision is in his hand. And that group discusses again, drawing his attention. And one of the men asks what kind of shit player she is. And he asks Kion Tuka if she doesn't know that keeping the position is the basic when hunting in groups. And he asks why she's acting like a troll. So the priestess asks him to calm down. And he asks why he should. Because of her, they have to hold on to the hunt. And he says that just because that piranha joined in the group, and Jaiwoo is seeing all that box bullshit. And remember that Choi asked for only one thing for him. And he says he doesn't know if he's suspicious saying that, but Chronolife is a very good game. Freedom, romance, and adventure. It is a fantasy world larger than anyone could ever imagine. Then he asks the boy to try to avoid destroying him. Just enjoy it. And Jiyu, she begins to think of these words. This while that man who was giving healing the girl, sending her to great from there while she finger in the middle to her, saying she won't hunt with her anymore. Everyone goes out of the girl, saying they can't believe they're using the same items, while this one is expelled from their group and is behind. Totally head down, Jaiwoo says that adventure, romance, none of this happens there, because as he expected, it is the jungle law that reigns. So he totally scorns Choi's invitation to enjoy that, says he will really enjoy his way. And he says he wants the broth of his soup even thicker, and will put even more broth in it. And throw a wood in that group of suckers who expelled the girl. However, he can't complete his attack. After all, the girl who was back began to scream. And she says that this is a shit game, cursing the game of all that is name. And he says that this is the complete garbage, because those bastards have no eye to things, because they do not know how great their weapon is. And she says she spent a lot of money to buy that sword. So Jaiwoo finds herself in her. After all, she's doing the same show he did on his first day. And the girl starts shouting that she doesn't need any of them, because she will not join any other group to hunt, and it's going to hunt alone. And she leaves hitting her feet. And he says that a long time has passed, and he doesn't know what to think now. But while he is in his monologue, the girl is attacked by one of those monsters from the beginning. No, their group, and she is completely paralyzed in front of that monsters, and they begin to roar her direction, and the only thing she can do is close her eyes and tremble with fear, and then Jaiwoo falls in front of her, asking why he made that choice. But he doesn't talk much, throwing an attack up. And with that, such a strong attack that comes out of the atmosphere is launched, and it cleans every surroundings of those. And the girl is not understanding what's going on, and he thinks that solidarity, pity, he doesn't think it was for these reasons. He says he came to the conclusion that he did it because he looked fun. And he looks at the girl thinking that it was a little complicated and chaotic. Anyway, so that's it. This is the prologue of that story, and everything starts with him asking if she wants to hunt with him, and it is said that its story finally begins there. However, very different from what he thought. The girl simply has him screw, because she does not marry the noobs, and leaves cursing him hitting his foot. And he is left behind without understanding anything, saying it was not a quiet start. And in reality, it is said that a problem caught the attention of the world, and people nowadays call that day of the Judgment Day, the end of the world. And an incessant debate was happening in the world gaming community, and everyone is wondering the identity of the person who killed 800,000 players. He did a second murder of 3 million people, and narrate him as a genocide psychopath, a battle god and an authentic expert, and say he's the strongest of Chrono Life. But one of the haters doesn't like it, asking how he must be a bug or a nasty hacker, and they say this is a very reasonable opinion. After all, one account 3 million makes no sense to start conversation, and everyone starts to agree. After all, this is not a number that can be overcome with attributes and control, and have hacker kicking out forever, charging for justice, and send Chrono Life to do their work. And everyone was focused on the Chronolive response. So finally there was an advertisement from the company, who say they would like to provide them with an official announcement about that situation. So they say that with it, it was discovered that this is a normal user. And everyone is surprised by that. And they say that according to their investigation, the user is neither a hacker nor bug abuser. He followed the rules and regulations of the game. And everyone who reads this can barely believe. So as soon as the controversy is over, they learn that Chronolife's server fell because of that person. They say that apparently he killed a lot of people in a moment, and everyone starts to think that he's a very angry guy in real life, and they wonders how he would be. But they are not sure, since he has a hood in the photo of the wanted, and he really has a very badass face. But in reality, the guy is a hell of a sucker, who is following the girl so far, while she is a little embarrassed, and she asks him why he is still there. And he says he's doing this because they should do it, in a hunting group. So she asks when she agreed with that, because she won't hunt with someone poor and indecent like him. And he keeps wondering why he would be indecent, and she asks if it's wrong. After all, he's using a underwear under that cover. And besides, he uses a twig that only the level 1 uses, and she says she has no time to play with noob, sending him grading from there. And Jaiwoo keeps wondering what he is, because she is claiming that he is indecent. He says he even saved her getting rid of those monsters with an attack. Then Urus says he saw what happened, for the eyes of that human were closed when Ryung saved Then he starts to think, noting that she doesn't know how strong he is. And in that he has the brilliant idea of continuing hiding his power, and starts to call her, asking the girl to carry him. So he says he is actually new in the game, so he knows nothing, and asks her to carry her, calling the girl master. And she falls on this crooked chat, remembering the humiliation she had early, and is all happy to be called the master. So Urus asks what he's doing, and he says he's pretending to be weak, because he first has to look weak to hide his power. Urus asks if this was the stupid idea he had told him before, but the girl really falls on this totally stupid talk, saying that this is kind of embarrassing, but usually the master is someone who should help the nobles, and then Love invites him to her group. And he says this expert will help you this time. And the girl is at the 20-4 level with some package status. And then the two go close to the front city, the beginning of the dungeon, and she leaves for the attack, falling into the punch with the rabbits half demonic. Then the rabbit bear of level 4 begins to roar, and she continues to defeat, but one of them comes in the back, and she can just divert, but soon it gives a pirouette, and back kicking his head, with the drop of the fallen dragon, thus defeating one of the monsters, and in that, they start from it. And she pose, saying they can come up of this master. And so, things get very excited, and Jaiwoo asks if she doesn't fight very well, and Urus says yes, and he says no matter how low the monster level, it will be dangerous if it is surrounded by them. Then the girl is still there carrying him, and Urus says he doesn't have to worry, because that human has very good equipment. And he says that only her weapon costs about 10 million gold, and Jaiwoo is surprised by that. After all, this is 10 million won. And Urus says that all other equipment of her is also superb, and the total should give 100 million gold. And Jiyu, he wonders if she is not a noob, because how would she have equipment like that? And Urus says this is obvious. After all, she's a pay-to-win. And Jiyu, remember her talking to those guys, asking if they have no eyes for things, and don't notice how good her items are. And she says she spent a lot of money on this game. So Jaiwoo keeps wondering if she really spent a lot, but he says he has no reason to spend 100 million. So she calls him a little cute, saying that even if she will carry, there is no reason to be sitting without doing anything, and tells him to hit them with that twig. And Ju starts to see that he's giving shit. After all, if he beats it, it will be bad. And she tells him to do that, because he has to fight alone to get strong faster, and asks if he will continue to be an asshole. And a rabbit appears in her cliff. She keeps saying that, anyway, this behavior is no, because he doesn't even want to get stronger. But as long as she's too chatter, he gives a little toe with the twig on the rabbit and explodes him on her back. She keeps wondering what happened, seeing only his ashes, and she somehow thinks she beat a very strong wind in the dungeon, and he realizes that he is very screwed, because he is having a crisis in the idea of hiding power. And so, Love receives a message asking if she is crazy. After all, will start 10 minutes from now, and tells her to get out of the game soon. And she gets a little sad and says she'll have to go down for a while and come back later. And she says she will take about 30 minutes and send him to be hunting for the mobs. And Jaiwoo keeps wondering what hers is, because she only left when she was in the mood. And he keeps wondering what she does in real life, as she spent 100 million in the game. And Urus even kicks it is a golden cradle. And the girl, she's inside a very luxurious hotel. Then the lifeline of Chrono Life, taking your VR and showing to be beautiful in real life. And she keeps thinking about the adventure she had with her pantry and starts laughing. In this, another woman enters her room, asking if she is crazy, because she is still sitting using that thing, and asks if she decided to leave her work. And the two start with a show of affection, with her sending the woman to open her eyes, because she is already taking. And the one who seems to be the girl's agent says she's proud of her, calling her addicted to games, and sent her sit down, because less than 10 minutes left. But she notices that the girl was playing, wearing her glasses again, and he says I already told her not to do that, because her nose is marked. Then she says she knows that, but she gets anxiety disorder if she doesn't wear her glasses. Then the mark on the nose she can hide with makeup, and the woman thinks she has nothing to do. Send her sit down, because she will use makeup for this. And he says that if it weren't for the money, she would have already killed the girl and killed later. And in that she begins to produce love totally. And the girl has a huge change. And so get on stage. And it is said that this will be the last performance of the music banking today. And it is said that this idol was first for 13 consecutive weeks. A very popular idol, the best singer and songwriter, Hang Sarung. And everyone sees the madness with her showing up, doing a little heart and performing for everyone. And her name is Hang Sarung, 17. Idol, singer and songwriter. And her hobby, which the public doesn't know, are games. Meanwhile, Jaiwoo was left behind, and he soon gives a smile, saying he should practice a little before his master returns. And Horace wonders what kind of practice he will do. But the boy says he wants to hide his power. He needs to practice. In other words, he should try to beat without killing. But apparently things do not work that well. After all, again from the stratosphere you can see his attack. So that God who appeared to Jiho sees everything that is happening and thinks that beating without killing it seems very fun. And also asks if your mother agrees with that. And then, it is explained a little more about in Sarung, and she is 18, a high school student, and entered the music industry very early, and she experienced a difficult start and was unpopular for a while, but now she has stabilized as the best singer and songwriter, so it has been at the top for 14 consecutive weeks. And in this, the presenter begins to congratulate her, saying that the sad case of her first song, the story of the little one would be. He asks how she is able to write letters as moving as that, and she says it's because she likes to be alone at home. She reads collections of poems, and sometimes even fairy tales. However, she begins to say that her manager asked her not to mention fairy tales, as this is kind of embarrassing. And she says it's a very childish hobby, and in that everyone falls in love with the facet that the girl is doing. But in the meantime, the manager says she's deceiving the whole country, because she is very ingenious. Instead of poetry and conte fairy, this is a lot of lie, because her hobby that the public doesn't know is playing. So the presenter says she is dated to play an important role in a drama. And he says she's going to be a rude high school, and she says that's right. And he was going through difficult times because of this role. After all, she never cursed, not even once since she was born. But the truth comes to light inside the game, with her cursing the little Kyuk, asking if he wants to catch. After all, his boss came back and he didn't even greeted her. And he asks since the girl is her boss, and she says it's since now. And it's good he doesn't complain. After all, he wants to be loaded. And it is said that Hansarang is the kind of person who releases the stress of his daily life playing games. So, Urus asks what he's doing, sending him just get rid of this rude person at once. However, he begins to say that he is hiding his power, and he has to pretend to be weak. And in that, the girl begins to lodge him to too much, sending him to call her of chief love. And the face that Urus makes is literally my face, seeing all this clowning, and he realizes that the idea of that crazy worked. And in that, she asks Jaiwoo if he practiced a lot hunting monsters, and he says yes, it was a process that demanded extreme patience, with a half-empty face, and says that his journey is really far from over. But Urus begins to say that it is very useless to beat without killing, and the girl begins to say that he is an eccentric newbie and is anxious about it, and soon she realizes that she has not asked his name yet, asking what is his character's name, and he notices that he did not tell him, and when she was going to say his name, she says she doesn't matter, she can just call him Akuche. An important detail is that his real name has already been said, but the character's name has not yet rolled, and in that he gets hand, asking why she wanted to know her name, and just behind him some people are watching them, and they say they finally found the girl, and they start making plans. And the leader has all the guild members together in that dungeon. For that day, they will charge justice. And up front of those two crazy people, find another electronic rabbit, level 20-2. And in that, she sends Geo up to him like a Pokemon, and he really goes. But when he was getting close to the monster, he starts slowing down and goes so slow that he begins to tremble. And even the rabbit doesn't understand what is going on there. And so he touches the cock in the rabbit, so light, but so light, that only a hair. But even so, the damage the rabbit carries is ridiculous high, and he falls all hard on the floor. And Geo notes that he really managed to hit without killing, because he is still alive, and it is all happy. So Love is all happy, saying he killed first, and he says he was very strong. And in that, the boy is all happy, but a dagger comes toward them. But Love takes it from the front, and can return that dagger. And in that, the man holds, even though he has his face scratched, and says it is amazing, but wonders if it should give credit to his equipment. And in that she asks who he is. And he wonders if she really forgot about her voice. And he says it hurts him. And he is the head of the Holosan Guild. Mr. Kim. And behind him are Mr. Hill, Mr. Lee and Mr. Kong, Mr. Choi and Mr. Wu. So she is surprised that this guild is there. And he says it's been a long time. And now he asks what the two are plotting. But there is no time for her to answer and tells everyone to go up. And she speaks to the cuteness that it is very dangerous and tells him to move away. But in that, she sets her guard to invent them all. And it really can, knocking out the first very easily. Then she steps on his head and jumps over the next and kick the drop dragon again, opening the floor and hitting everyone. And they try to attack them all together, but they can't. Meanwhile, the Quakinha is in the corner, along with asking what is going on, and he says he can guess, based on what he is seeing. It was from the guys of the guild relation. They got a fight with Love, and they have fought a few times, but they always end up losing to her. But that uncle back there doesn't know when to give up, so he came for another revenge, and he asks if that's not it. So Urus says he is probably right, and he says that the guys are very weak. After all, a group of guys around the 20 level is being destroyed by Love. And Urus begins to mock, asking what to fight will end up giving it. And their boss says that, as planned, she must be distracted now, and send that girl next to him start. And she goes up quickly with the agility of a killer and appears behind Love, opening his empty hand. And she is in doubt about what is happening. After all, she has nothing in her hands. She asks if this is a crowded class. And the woman simply uses the style of Kazuma. And a yellow flash appears in front of them all, and Love feels that they sigh and disappeared. And the woman begins to say that those weapons are amazing, and says she must have been born in a golden cradle. And Jaiwo, in turn, seeing his ally taking a suffocation, keeps wondering what kind of skill is that. And Urus says it is to steal from the bandits class. However, this is strange. After all, it should not be that stolen. And Jaiwo asks who cares, because he has nothing for her to steal. He only has his underwear and his cover. However, obviously, he has something much more important right there on the side. And he looks at the twig, noting that it can be bad. Then he begins to cling to it and runs closely. And then the guild leader notices that that guy was there too, and sent her not even worry about him, because just looking at the guy you can see that he is a newbie and has nothing to steal. But the woman, curiously, has a very interesting reaction, which she looks a little oriented looking at him only in his underwear running like a crazy. And then she throws the gloves on the leader, saying that it seems that he doesn't know, because stealing of someone who has nothing is more fun. That must be why two guys on a motorcycle stole my galaxy pocket. Really, I had nothing, but they took what I had. And in that, she uses her ability to appear in front of Jaiwo, asking where he's going. In this, she begins to activate her steal toward the boy, and he begins to notice that she screwed up a lot, as this is not time to hide her power, and tries to use her attack on her, but she can divert, and ends up stealing his cock, which is no longer in his hand. And she looks at him, giving that evil smile, saying that now that cock is all hers. And seeing that she took her weapon, he thinks that now she screwed up, and she says that now she will be able to steal his hood, and except for his underwear he will be totally naked. She starts asking what that is, seeing Rose in front of her. Then he calls her arrogant mortal, asking how she dare to wield her without knowing who he is. And in that, she falls screaming, letting the strike fall to the floor, and Jaiwo takes. Then a notification is issued by saying that the Golden Soul refuses to recognize the enemy. And now, he is the owner of this weapon. And in that, the Miniman appears asking how she tries to get her. For no one can have you except your Ryung. And he says it seems to be overwhelmed. And so, Joe begins to make affection in Orochi, totally grateful, because he delivered him from a big problem by refusing to be used by her. And the girl is on the floor trembling with fear, asking what it was now, asking even if it would be a ghost, but she says it was too real to be a ghost. And so the guild leader asks what her problem is, asking if he forgot his work, but she says she has no chance. After all, she is a professional mercenary who works for money. And while she's saying that, the Blackberry appears, dropping her a kick in her face. However, she narrowly dodges and she keeps sending her back her gun, calling her thief. And in that she says she scared her, because this surprise attack was quite fierce. But she says that maybe the girl is behind the wrong target, because his gun is with the leader of that guild. And in that she gets more and more annoyed, saying she will kill them all. However, Jaiwoo simply puts the girl to sleep, hitting her cock slowly on her head. And he says that this is his ability to hit without killing. And everyone keeps wondering what he's doing. After all, they were both together. And he says it is because he is hiding his power. In this, the thief begins to ask what he's talking about, but he really shows what he meant, throwing everyone up quickly. And she, noticing the shit she got into, starts asking if he did it, but he doesn't even want to know and strokes her cock in her head and says it was she gets only 1 bar of life while Cosmic is draft, not understanding what's going on. And he starts talking to her, who went through a lot of shit, but still became stronger mentally. But because of her, now he almost had a heart attack. And in that, he burst her head with everything. And so, already in a calm pasture, Love wakes up with the boy eating behind her. And she wonders where they are and what happened to those guys. And he says that there is a field near the dungeon and those guys left. She is in doubt. What do you mean? And why did she pass out of nowhere? Then he gives her his pawns and asks if it was Gilda Hallisan who did it, and question what kind of work they did, and who they are and what they do. And this girl starts asking why he's trying to be all cool and asks if he wants to die. But she says she will tell you, since he got involved because of him. And she asks if he has heard of the term PW. And he's not understand, but Urus explains that PW is the acronym for pay to win, a term used in online games. He asks how he knows this. After all, he is just an NPC of a game. And he says he saw it in Wikipedia. And it really starts to speak a page of the whole Wikipedia. But then Love simplifies him, saying they are users who spend billions in games. And she says that is what means being a pay-to-win player. So he realizes that the whole Gilda Guild are pay-to-win players. And she says that a few months ago she bought these fists unknowingly in the auction, and one day Guild Ralikeo began to hunt her to try to steal it from her. But still, they are a bunch of old bandits, and their control is shit. So she won in all her meetings. In this, she asks again how he managed to recover his items, asking if he stole his. But he starts to put the worst little friend I've ever seen in her life, saying they left and left, or maybe have forgotten. And he says that was it. So she doesn't buy this idea much. But he says he doesn't know what happened. However, she is sure they will come after them once more. And she says that the obsession of that old swept is no joke. And in that he says this is a little strange, asking why they insist so much about taking her weapon. She says it's obvious. It's because these fists cost 10 million gold. But he says that is why he is strange. After all, these old people spend billions and are obsessed with a weapon of 10 million. And he says that there is certainly something behind it all. Then, in the hideout of the Gilda Ralikeo, their leader begins to take a beating, speaking to his superior, saving them, and gives him another chance. However, the superior tells him to silence his mouth, saying that they are all useless. So he says he can't waste more time, and he will leave this mission with the 4 heavenly kings. So they come asking if Linda didn't get rid of her little Hyunglin, and he says that this is very cruel. After all, they have dealt with 3 boys, and a furry, an elf, and a weird appear. And the Dudapaleo begins to ask if it makes sense that this guy is in the same division as they, 4 heavenly kings, and they say he's a guy with 100 million gold. Then it is said that he is the 2nd heavenly king of the Heavenly Guild, and his assets are 1.7 billion. And the other elf also starts talking bullshit. However, his heritage is 1.4 billion. So Furry is just silent. And he is the 1st heavenly king, with its equity of 2.1 billions. And in this is Paolo and Sagasta near the old man, saying that it is a pathetic strategy. After all, he only thought of hiring a mercenary, and that is why he failed. So Furry asks to leave everything with him, because the silent fist, or whatever it is, he can get 12 hours. In this, the guy who looks like their king begins to laugh and says this is great, being presented as the master of Gilda Hallisan, Mr. King, that his heritage is 12 billion. And then he tells everyone to show them the terror of the Hallisan Guild. And he says that the blood festival began. And in that, Gio appears behind him with the greatest calm in the world. So everyone keeps wondering what is happening. And the boy says they look like a bunch of children. After all the blood festival and 4 heavenly kings, and begins to find until they have Shun and Bayu. And then the king asks who he is and where he came from, but Joe tells him to discover. To provoke, he pays a snack on them and says he will be hard to hide his powers if they continue to fill the bag of Captain Love. After all, he is pretending to be weak. Then he calls the 4 heavenly kings to end the winding and go right on him. But the king doesn't give a damn the boy and starts calling him crazy and tells them all to kill him. But Ju only gives that little smile and drops the wood in them. And they are obliterated from that place. In this, someone we know very well begins to approach, and Furry goes over the boy, but still catching and alive. And that person still keeps humming and approaching. Meanwhile, Jaiwoo remains in an intense battle that tears the hideout of the Holosan Guild in the middle. And the girl from afar notices what's going on and just laughs, releasing just a cue. Ida and the king, seeing the widespread shit that is happening, send all members of the Holosan Guild to attack. And Jaiwoo thinks that if they want to kill you, they will have to bring at least 3 million people. And in that he keeps giving wood around the world. And this time he can hold a little more of his power, giving wood enough just to defeat them. And the king sees that the choice is so ugly that his subordinate says he must hurry and escape, because he will be annihilated. So the king says he does not understand, because with the exception of Chin and his subordinates, all members of the guilds are warriors pay to win, and even the weaker among the new members spent at least 10 million. And not even the 5 largest guilds can belittle you. He asks who is that guy, and how he can, but he soon remembers, asking if he is himself, that of the rumors, and he notices that that is the naked guy, the little kyuk of. And he begins to say that the first time he started playing games was when he, in the 2nd grade of elementary school. And at that time, the games were not extravagant as today, and it was not so easy to level up, as there was no missions or raids. But still, it was a lot of fun, and he says he scolded his parents for sneaking at night. And he has a lot of affection for the memories of the time, when he climbed the level with his friends every weekend. And he says that as the years went by, he got older and began to be dragged on his responsibilities, and he lived a busy life, where he had no time to remember the past. And suddenly, he realized one thing. He is already in the house of 40, and in that, the subordinate brings a PC of tube for him. He says he would give him a special gift, soon to him, who worked more than anything, a gift from the past. And even wanting to feel the retro vibe that it brought, he says he was not the only one to be changed by the turmoil of time. Meanwhile, the subordinates keep picking up too much to the face of the twig, and he continues to look at that scene of destruction. So Jaiwoo says it misses very little, saying that only both of them are missing. And he says the end of players' pay to win is sad. And in that he asks why they need to steal equipment from other players. But forget that, saying it's time for beating. So the king remembers the payment he made on that old computer, an amount of 12 billion won. And he says he was not the only one to be changed by the turmoil of time, and he no longer has to work hard. With just a few clicks, he can be how strong he wants, just spending. And with this force, users who spent little, or no money, in the game will be abused, indiscriminately. And he starts thinking about Pei-chun, and to win, he must deliver the money. And that is the current situation. Current online games. So he says that still, continues to explore several games, but they are all the same. And last, a game so acclaimed by critics. He entered Chrono Life, and he says he wants to find it. It doesn't matter how, something he forgot for a long time. This thing at that time. And as he thinks all melancholy, he takes his head in his head, and Jaiwoo again uses his ability to hit without killing. And in that he falls to the ground stinging, and the boy says that from today the grocery guild is over, and has them no longer disturb the captain love. And simply put your foot there. But the king asks before he leaves if he is that guy who killed the 5 biggest guilds not long ago, and annihilated 3 million from the Worldwide Guild Alliance. And then he asks how much money the boy spent. And he says he must have used a lot of money to achieve this force. However, soon he will also notice all these efforts so far, he has only been struggling to find something that doesn't even exist. But Ju says he doesn't know that shit he's talking. However, he also spent an ugly money. And in that, the old man asks how much it would be. They would be tens of billions, or even hundreds of billions. However, the boy says he spent 50-5,000 wons in an initial warrior package. And the old man is completely square with this. After all, the boy spent nothing and remembers his childhood. And soon the question to his subordinate, asking how many games they tested after Ragnarok. He says they may have been about 8. And in this, the old man says that it seems that this game is quite fun. So that woman says that, of course, after all, Chrono Life is divine. And she gives hello to everyone from the Holosan Guild, saying it's a very beautiful night. In this, she says she has a little time she wasn't there. But Gilda's hiding place is much worse. And she soon asks about it, asking if he managed to prepare. And he says the preparations were going well. But now he's out. The agreement to cooperate with her ends now. And the girl starts to laugh, asking if it's really, then give him a marked cutting him in half. In this, the subordinate is terrified seeing that. And the girl thinks she should have asked why he did it. But she's not in a good mood now. Then she kareva her scepter on the back of the subordinate, and he dying until he falls dead. And she starts thinking about Jaiwoo, saying that the Gilda girl is over. And she also remembers that he had them no longer disturb the captain love. And in that, she changes to her goddess skin, wondering who this love captain would be. And a message appears saying he annihilated the Hassalan guild, and the combat experience is being calculated, and the experience comes to PR with him, and they congratulate Jaiwo, saying that he reached the highest level, and he keeps wondering what that is, and tells Urus that the system has just said that he reached the maximum level. Then he opens his status window to take a look, and soon sees that he is at 990-9 level, with 4,960 points not distributed. And this Dizzy, when he looked only at his status window, looks like a pan seeing that. They say that Chronolife is the first in number of active users, and the first in number of accumulated subscribers, and also the first in sales and first in user ratings. And it is said that it is the best virtual reality game in the world. However, a man is giving an interview. He is asked if he will arrive at the maximum level soon. However, he says this is simply impossible, even if he is a professional player of Chronolife Fake. And his name is Lee Sang-hyuk. So it is said that although all players around the world are playing day and night, no one can reach the maximum level. And he says he's not sure, because even if all the ranks in the world, including if he spitted 20-4 hours a day, could take decades. But even so, Jaiwo has managed to reach this level, and Urus begins to celebrate, saying that he cannot believe that his master is the first level in the world, and says that as expected his Hyunjin is amazing, and says he is very proud of him. However, Jaiwo is too shocked, because he is sure it was level 7 at that time. However, this is an obvious coincidence, because on the first day he took the twig, 800,000 players were murdered, and besides, countless monsters and dungeons were on the way to attack. And adding the experience of Chronolife's strongest boss, Urus, and the army of Urus, which is part of the highest level dungeon, the experience was definitely obtained with the massacre of 3 million members of the World Guild Alliance. The destruction of the planet, and the first in the world to master the level was born. And so he begins to receive an honor, with a shine around him. Tell me that by arriving at the maximum level, the player will enter a transcendental space. While he's on this hell, Love begins to say that he's bored, and soon he can't take it anymore, asking where that shit underwear is, because he told him to wait a while, but the sun is even if. And she remembers him asking the Hassalan guild and gets all red, but says she does so much, because this kind master will wait for another hour. Meanwhile, this crazy man is in a floating city, and getting there, he is in doubt if he wonders where he is. He begins to notice that he is dragged from side to side these days, and he says it was the same when he met God, and when the president of Chronolife sprang into the wool, and the golds don't help either, making a lot that the boy is quite popular, and then someone welcomes him, calling him a human child, saying he never imagined he would find so fast. And he says he is really extraordinary. In this person presents himself as the guide of transcendence, and says that welcomes him to good. And with that, the god of the class is presented to us. And he says he praises the first step on this arduous journey, and says that he says no, because he used to be an aspiring prosecutor. And so the system says that the conditions were fulfilled, and the transition to the secret class began. And in that he shines yellow again, and several crosses and some potatoes appear near him, and invade the boy's body. And they say that the soul of the sword has infiltrated his body. And so the soul of the shield and the soul of the bow also infiltrate his body, and then the soul of the wand also enters it. And one after the other, the soul of punches, the soul of the spear, the soul of the tacape, the soul of the dagger, and so on. All the souls of weapons infiltrated his body. And finally, he receives a full change of work, and he receives the secret class of novice master, and the privileges of the new master work are delivered. And so, the points distributed in the states will be reset, and their points will be tripled. And so, he gets 14,980-5 points not distributed. And Urus begins to freak out with this distribution of points available, and asks what is happening out of nowhere, and asks if this is going on because of the effects of change to the secret class. And Geo asks if this surprised him more than the change to a secret class. And he says of course, because usually 5 points can be achieved when it rises level. And Geo says he knows it, but Urus asks why he got 15 by level and he. Even if there is another maximum level user, its pure status would be 3 times higher. And in that he shows not calling so much, but Urus begins to scream, saying that this is very ridiculous. And he says this will be considered the greatest achievement within the game's community. And soon Jaiwo, being Neanderthal he is, begins to play all his status and only one of them. And Urus begins to question what he is doing, but he says he is obvious. He is distributing his points. However, Gold says he is not talking about it, but of this careless distribution. And he says that if he wasted even a point, he will consider him a loser. However, we see that he is doing even greater shit. He is really putting everything in just one state. He asks why he's doing it. That, even more this status there. And soon he ends up distributing all his points. And he says he doesn't need any other status for now. And only that is enough. And Gold realizes that the guy screwed up with everything. And it is certainly confirmed. He is a loser. And at the Chronolife headquarters, they say they have a problem, and the president asks what is happening. But the man says he thinks he needs to see it personally, and says he has a problem with the user, and when they will see, the controller just tells him to look at the screen, and he notices that the boy of the sink has finally reached the maximum level, but he says the problem is not the level, and tells him to look at what that guy is doing. And they observe the discussion between Rose and Dio, because he is putting all the status in one. Then the president asks why all this noise, and asks what is the status he chose. But seeing that status, he begins to laugh, saying that that guy really likes the game and says he's making the most of his way. The man says that this is not time for jokes and asks if this would not be a completely meaningless character. He says that if he realizes he's doing a shit character, they will not have to know what he will do when he gets stuck. However, the president tells him to be calm, because he said several times, the game company has no right to get involved in choosing the player. But the man says they need to take some measurements. So the president simply comes out, and he thinks he can't believe he's distributing everything at that extreme. And it is even surprised by him to have taken a novice master, and in that he begins to laugh, thinking about trash character with no future, and says that in the history of virtual reality games, the worst and strongest character and then the guy speaks created, saying that this is the last step of the orientation and he will have a choice. And he says that one of the transcendental weapons he is wielding will be given to him. And Ju says it's a great luck, for free there is no way to refuse. And in that he begins to wonder what weapon he should choose. And he says that to tell the truth, all are cool. So he says he has already decided, sending the guide to pass them all. And in this, the guide says that he cannot fulfill his request, because excessive greed leads to unnecessary anger, and send him to choose with wisdom. But Gio asks if he will pass now, or only after him fills him with beating. In this, the guide and everyone from Chronolife gets incredulous at what the boy is talking and calls him crazy. And then it is said that the god of the classes is furious, and by his face, the crazy man is very pissed. And the system says that it has a hostile relationship with the god of the classes, and he begins to be attacked. And Gio says he now understood. It looks like he's asking for a beating. So the epic battle of the god of classes and the crazy piled holding of Varys begins. And in this, the system says that the god of the classes has been very pissed to him, and now he has a hostile relationship with the god. In this, that same god stands in an attack position before Jaiwoo. So he says he understood, but it seems that he is asking for a luck. And then the two confront themselves, but the god ends up burying Jaiwoo inside the earth. Leosaurus is scared, asking why he stopped his attack, and then the god says that he never thought he would kill a transcendent with his own hands. However, unlike he was thinking, an attack comes from below. He pulls half the face of the god, and then Jaiwoo goes out saying that it hurt, and wonders if it's because he is a god, and so his status goes down 2 bars. It is revealed that he put 14,990 points in the Constitution. That would be physical health. This status affects the maximum HP and its recovery, and also influences immunity to conditions. Remembers when he was criticizing Gil's decision. After all, he was putting all his points on a single status, and he wonders why soon these status. So Urus tells him that he made a fatal mistake, because he became a shit character, but the boy asks why. So Urus says that all equipment in Chronolife has a loading weight, so he needs a minimum amount of strength, no matter his class. And he says that, simplifying, he will not be able to put any equipment, except for that twig. But Jaiwoo is in doubt. After all, he just needs it. And in this, another dialogue box appears to him, talking about a hidden ability, and saying that the conditions were met. And the first condition would be the master level. Condition 2 would be the constitution status above 14,000. And condition 3 is said that when it reaches the above conditions, the damage received is a certain value. And Urus goes crazy, for hidden ability is the healing factor. And the healing factor would be the improved recovery. All damage performed will be immediately converted into healing. This gives you complete immunity to negative conditions such as poisoning, disease, and paralysis. And so, all the blood he had lost in the attack of the god returns, because he caused a huge damage. So Jiho wonders if he is really a shit character, and soon the god begins to feel a tremendous pain and is very much puto, for that insignificant mortal dared to hurt him. And in this he lets out a lightning of his eyes that crosses Jaiwoo, and he falls to the ground all screwed. However, he begins to laugh, saying that, as expected, Chronolife is too good. And in this, the hole in your chest begins to blush as worse as possible, and you feels a damn disgust. So that god gets more and more pissed off because wanting to kill him, but his attacks barely take damage from Gio, that he can recover very easily. And in this the god is and our prota is getting happier with this bizarre that he's doing. And in that, he says he's a good size and invites God to finish it. And he says that thanks to him, he benefited in many ways. And now he must simply pass all the weapons and disappear. So the god is on inception and speaks to the human child, saying that endless greed will consume it someday. And when that day comes, the Jew is little screwing what he's talking about. So she simply attacks with an attack up that leaks from that islet and invades the entire solar system around. And in that it is said that the god of the classes cease to exist, that reality soon breaks, and is said that transcendent space. It will break, and it will be forced to return to your original world. And in that he returns to the normal chronolife, appearing below like a hole in the floor. And then he realizes that all weapons are there, and they are all transcendent and bright. He says that he has become the owner of all transcendental weapons, and so he collects them all, placing them in the subspace, and it is said that they will answer his call. And he soon starts to say that this is great, but someone else doesn't like it at all. After all, love is very slut with him. After all, he made him wait for a long time, and she says she won't let it go, no matter what his excuse is. And in that, he appears after her, all sympathetic, but she starts his face and starts hitting the boy, asking if he wants to die, because he's already night and he didn't arrive. And he says he thought he was going back faster, but some things delayed him, but he's already there. And in that she says she's leaving, and he asks where she goes, but she simply says she's going out of the game, and he gives her a goodbye, and she feels a little bad, saying that tomorrow, at 7:30, she will have left work, and send him to log 2. He says that if he arrives late again, she will kill you for real. Look, if the protra wasn't the door he was going to, maybe rolled a little romance between the two. And in that the boy begins to say that she really does what she wants, but the URU draws everything, noting their development. Then he says he will clear up too, saying he is over midnight. So he lies with the game, and in reality, he leaves that lawn house where he was. So he says it was great, because Corona life is a lot of fun. And in that he begins to think about how much he will sell those transcendental weapons. And he says they are the first transcendental rank items, and he will probably make a great money with that. But he remembers thinking if these items are negotiable, as it will be shit if he can't sell. And soon he sees that there is something open, and says he is hungry, and will eat a whatever. But he doesn't have a wrist in his pocket, and says he will let it go, because he is tired. Tired of being poor. And in this he begins to say that the tuition of the game continues to climb non-stop, and he wonders if he should take more shift in his part-time work. However, he begins to notice few things. For Urus said that the girl's gun costs around 10 million gold. And he also says that the rest of her equipment is very expensive, and he says he must be for about 100 million gold, which are 100 million won. And he only notices that if he sells the items in the game, he can change them for money. And in that, he rushes back to Lawn House. While he enters the game, he is said about the number 1 game, Chronolife. And all the rankers of this game have already acknowledged that there is a forbidden place in Chronolife, and that would be the intersection between life and death, the grave of all mortals. And it is said that it is the highest level hunting soil in history, and no one has managed to clean it. And for unknown reasons, he was kept hidden. A place in Chronolife, where Rose, the strongest boss, resides, the Valley of the Dead. And in that crazy one gets there and Rose welcomes him and his home. Then the boy walks, saying that from now on he is about Eurocare. And the petty tells him to enjoy as much as he can. However, he can only think one thing, because he was so blind from the revenge that he didn't even think about taking the items and just left them behind. And he will make sure to make good use of them. So Urus begins to apologize to his friends. After all, they will all be massacred. Everyone leaves over the boy, and seeing that mountain of monsters on him, he says that now, this is the day that will mark the end of his miserable life. And he soon proposes to make some money. This, while you think you will get rich in a moment. And in this, he stands face to face with the Tebert of Despair, the Abyss Pencil and the Dawn Trim, the 3 strongest of the Army of Diamonds. However, he sounds them quickly with obliteration. He says that with only 2 attacks up, all monsters in the Valley of the Dead were annihilated, and then a sword and several valuable items fall in front of him. A river of money coming down from the sky like a rain. And Urus is impressed that he ended up with that in a moment, and says that he did a good one. However, the boy asks what he's talking about. After all, it is not over yet, because he is just starting. And he sends here to look ahead, because the mobs have already baked. And in that it is explained about breeding. It is a phenomenon where monsters die and reappear after a certain time. However, special entities such as Head and Twin Dragon do not bred. And in that, he himself just asking his friends to run, and they keep going up to Jaiwa. He says that's the first time he's going to sell these things. So he wonders if he should score only 100 times, still doing this several times and several times. And it is said that in the past there was a very interesting lecture at Harvard University, and the bald man who was presiding over asked if they know Bill Gates, the richest man in the world and founder of Microsoft. And he says that even if Gates finds $100 on the floor on his way to work, he wouldn't catch. And he asks the students what the reason for it would be. And he explains that if Bill Gates took that money, It would be an economic loss for him, as it takes between 2 to 3 seconds to squat and take the money. But it receives at least US dollars per second. In other words, economically, he would be losing US dollars. And they say it is a great lecture mixed with an appropriate and pleasant joke. However, including the recharge time and the time required to farm 100 spawns, it's about an hour, and then Prota begins to laugh like a psychopath and continues to laugh. And he says that in total the accumulated sum of items on the floor is about 15 billion gold, which would be 15 billion from one in cash. And based on the talk mentioned earlier, Bill Gates has a profit of about 500 millions of one per hour, and he begins to laugh. After all, in a moment, a young middle-time worker at a convenience store in South Korea exceeded the income rate of the richest man in the world. And in that, our Prota, ridiculously intelligent, would spend money intelligently. Then he passes the Gucci and totally changes his outfit to this ridiculous clothes. This car also ridiculous. So everyone starts looking at, saying it's the first time they see a Lamborghini. And he's taking too much wave. He says it's time for ostentation, and it accelerates the car with everything, and live up to what he came to do in the whole work, hitting the first post. And he starts to freak out. After all, his Lamborghini was 400 million. However, he cares little, buying another. After all, he is rotten rich. Meanwhile, at Chrono Life's company, they start giving the report, saying that the value of newly released items and equipment on the market is about Rp. But while the man gives the report, his thoughts begin to leak and he has a huge desire to escape this company. So the president listens to this and asks if they have any way they block the transactions of that guy. And they say that at this point it is impossible to do this, because it has not been long since the legalization of cash transactions within the game. So the president begins to have a headache. And when he answers the phone, he is Didakujo himself asking how things are there. After all, he's going to spend more money. And he says he was thinking of giving a gift to the president, but he's very pissed off. And he begins to curse gold. And he asks if something happened as he hangs up the phone. And it starts to think about what to buy now. But he comes to the conclusion that he has already bought everything he needed. But he feels something is missing, like no highlight. And he soon remembers, saying that he can't believe he has forgotten the most important thing. And so he simply buys an ultra-luxurious apartment and says that now yes, he got his highlight. And he thinks the first thing to do when moving is visiting his neighbors. And he arrives at the house next to he's saying that he is the neighbor who has just moved and he came to bring a rice cake. And the person inside begins to find this idiocy strange and asks him to wait a while. And when it opens, it's harangue, finding the boy in real life, which the two are always together. And Ju feels that moment there. It's the highlight of the day. And in the meantime, something goes to the girl de Diamos in Chrono Life. So the monsters there begin to attack him thinking he is a human. But he says that those imbecile things cannot even recognize his master, and begins to suck them all with your tentacles that come out of your back. And after that he simply sends all three perish. And the three strongest of the army of diamonds, they can no longer bred. And so it is said that he absorbed the levels of the targets, just like your status as well. And the data three strongest of the army of diamonds were completely deleted. And this person begins to visualize everything that happened to Gold and remembers his other half, asking his head. And he says he is the lost head of Gold, and he says it exists to plague all human beings, and this is Huracan. Meanwhile, Jaiwa was having her first date with Hansarung in real life, and she was very different from what she is in the game, but he didn't recognize at that time. And so, when the girl enters the apartment, her manager asks what is that, and she says it's the rice cake that the neighbor gave her. So she asks why rice cake, but the girl cares little, because she feels she has seen him before and can only remember the little tack, and in that she sends, "Your manager eat that." And they are two people who can't recognize themselves, because their forms in the game and in real life are very different. So the manager says she should hurry and change that school uniform, and she asks if she thinks it's a machine, because she arrived not even 30 minutes. And the manager says that if she doesn't want to, she can just postpone again. For the girl herself said she would finish filming until 7:30 to play. And she remembers the promise she made with her pantry. And he says that everything is fine, hurrying so that he can go soon. And the manager feels that she is with her in hand, noting that she found someone special in the game. And she wonders who is the lucky one who stole Harangue's heart. And the lucky one is this thing that you see so much. And then he keeps wondering the monsters. And he asks Urus what happened. After all, I only go from them fled. And he says that this is impossible, because the monsters are programmed to act only in a specific area. It is impossible for them to run away or escape, unless they are buggy, but it is as if they have disappeared without leaving traces. So he says this doesn't matter, because there are other places for him to hunt. So he just goes somewhere else to make money. And in that, Urus says it is true. But remember the boy that he would find love today? And he says yes, but stopping to think, it's almost 7:30. So he says the hunt was shit, and leaves the girls' meeting, saying it's a bag that he's too far away. And in that, Urus finds it strange, because he may feel a family spirit, but still threatening there. And in another corner, someone is facing the snow giant serpent, is Rose, 190 level, and a boss of that field. Then the head 2 begins to absorb this target as well. So he says it's not enough. And he says that to destroy that human being, he still has a long walk ahead. And in that the goddess of life comes to him, being surprised that he was already that far away. And he says that this is the expected of his dear child. So she says he eats a lot, but he tries to suck her saying it's not enough. Yet she seems to be delicious and really begins to suck the girl, and she gets completely dry and falls to the floor, but a message appears saying that absorption has failed and she gets jackpot, saying she can't believe it. After all, how he can scare that in mom, and asks if he's in puberty. So he keeps wondering if it was a hallucination magic, for he is sure he swallowed her. She says this is not important now. However, he notices that she is not a food he can eat now, and asks what is her nature. After all, the two have the same smell. So she points to the side, to a human city, and she says that there is a lot of food there, sending him to eat as much as he wants. And so he begins to salivate, being excited to invade that city. And in that he draws 2 pairs of wings saying he is the Huracan, and its sole purpose is to annihilate humanity. And so, he goes straight there, leaving that woman behind. And arriving in the city, he is already beginning to cause damned chaos, and everyone is wondering what is happening. However, their tales begin to reach all residents, and a woman starts to scream, but still, everyone is hit, and it begins a gigantic scale massacre, and begins to absorb the level of all targets. And without stopping, it starts to get stronger and stronger, and all players have become food for Huracan. And that was a place where both the beginners and the veterans worked, known as the initial village. And there are many new players there, as there are also many high-level users and active rankers. However, only one warning reigned in that place: deleted character. And so, the executive will talk to the director, saying that he is in trouble, as they are receiving a multitude of complaints from users. And they talk about calls and customer service, all kinds of communication, and lives on YouTube, and came out even on duty. And it's like almost a consultation department from one for one to be paralyzed. And they start wondering if being killed by a monster makes her character deleted. They pass the line totally. And the audience starts to hatch the game, wanting to fall out of it. So the president notes that Huracan has already appeared and says this is fun, but begins to ask how so. Then the director says that from now on they should order to monitor only 2 characters, and one is Huracan, and the other we know well who it is. So the goddess of life comes saying that he is really amazing, because she did not imagine that he would eat the whole village. And she says that the initial village became a ghost village in a moment, and he says it's not enough yet, and tells her to tell her where he can find more food. In this, she thinks a little in the next meal, but gives that giggle, saying that there is a good there, a very hot, and in real time is 7 and 30-4, and love is shaking with hatred. After all, the Quaquinha she had said that if he was delayed, she would kill him, and she's very jackaled by it. But when the girl notices someone coming, she looks back, and it's none other than the Huracan. And she, who was at the 20-4 level, is crazy looking at that. After all, that thing is in the 90-9 level. Meanwhile, in a city, a certain player is very discouraged. After all, he is the supreme commander of the union of the 5 largest guilds, the Eye of Falcon. That guy. However, it is currently completely down due to everything that has passed, and he was the top ranker in Chronolife, and the supreme commander of the World Union Guild, and with a unique and overwhelming charisma. He appeared in interviews, YouTube, news, and many others. He was a man who was unparalleled in Chronolife. However, after the final judgment, the World Union Guild was dissolved and the Falcao's Eye, who was the supreme commander, fell ruins after receiving all the blame and responsibility. Then he begins to narrate his own title, saying that all world guilds were at his feet. And he starts wondering if he thinks he will fall like this. But he was the wrong time, in the wrong place. Then, on that day, the Eye of Falcao witnessed the scene of several players being deleted. And so, he rushes to hide and asks what that is. And he sees on the ad board people telling them not to the initial village, because his character will be deleted. And the Hawkeye realizes that this is really going from the line. And soon, the goddess of life notes someone there. And in that repeats that scene of her telling him to go elsewhere. And when she points to a delicious thing, she is pointing to another place really. And Falcao's Eye sees it all, and begins to laugh like a crazy man. And already with love she feels that Guy is not a player, and asks if there was such a monster in the beginner's hill. Then the goddess of life appears asking if she is the Captain Love, and she says yes, and asks if she knows the Quaquinha, and she says it can only be that. After all, he is the only one who calls him by that name. And she tells Huracan who almost hit her, and asks why he's leaving his character with such a frightening skin. And he's not knowing what to say. And the goddess of life laughs, asking if she is close to that man she calls a little girl. And she tries to give Amiga, saying she was just wanting to play a little with him. And she says that even not liking him, he doesn't leave his shadow. So the goddess of life doesn't like what she is hearing. Good. Killed the crazy, rolled up with him, made the crazy life of hell. And now it gives jealousy? Ah, how cute, right? And she gives that evil smile, remembering the Hassalan Guild and the time they first spoke about the captain love. And she says the girl is really annoying. And so Huracan at the same time attacks the girl and lifts her up, sucking her, and in that the goddess of life asks her please die, calling her superestimated, and so blood goes to everything that is side and her character disappears, and then Huracan says she is delicious, saying that she is a very hot meal. So the goddess of life says that of course, after all, this is a piece of a god, and he keeps wondering what that is, but she says this is not important, he or she doesn't worry, and he calls him to eat even more delicious things while stepping on her scarf, but Jaiwoo appears asking where they think they're going, calling them sick, and he appears behind both, very pissed off, and in that, the goddess of life it is a little happy to see him, saying it's been a long time, who doesn't see the loser, and asks how he is. However, Jaiwoo tells her to shut up, saying that it is better to move that dirty nut foot right now, if she does not want to die. And in that, she notices what's going on and says she stepped on her by mistake. Then he sees the blackberry scarf there, and speaks to that human with tentacles, saying he will start the sparkle for him. In the beginning, he really raises his hand and gives a very serious session. And again, his attack goes out to the stratosphere. And after attacking Huracan, he says he will let her leak only once, calling her cockroach and sending her disappear. However, she takes it in sports, asking how there could be as a cockroach as beautiful as she. And besides, she tells him to pretend he is strong. After all, he cannot kill him anyway. And she still goes further, humiliating, saying that he should finish his work right before looking at him. After all, his enemy is right in front of him. And so Huracan appears flying over the boy, and she says Achille is her son. He really attacks the pirate with everything, and he says it surprised him, and asks what he is. After all, he's fine even after taking his attack. And he says that while scratching his belly. And Urus asks if he's okay, but he speaks. He says of course, and begins to regenerate in the worst possible way quickly. And Huracan asks what is to be surprised. After all, he can simply divert that kind of attack. And he says Jiho's attack didn't even reach him. And in this, Jiho realizes that he simply diverted, and says that it is better for him to swing harder. Huracan thinks it was simply a boy's bluff, asking if he means that his attack was not in full force. However, Jaiwoo says that so far all his attacks have been normal attacks, and he remembers every time he shook the continent, and then begins to emanate a yellow aura. And with that, a symbol of power appears in his belly, and the new master's unique ability is activated, and the spirit of the swordsman comes into action. And it is said that swordsman skills can currently be used once. And he calls Huracan Jr. Barada. After all, he is the son of the other. And he says that for the first time so far, he will use a skill. And if he takes it, he will be very injured. Then he tells Huracan to give his best and divert. And so he activates his ability, Continuous Cut, and really his attack comes out of that world, going straight to another world with the rings belt, and he remembers love as he gives his attack. And he once again explodes a planet with his strength, and is explained a little about the Continuous Cut. He cuts the enemy without stopping. And this is a basic ability of the swordsman. While this atmospheric bullshit is going on, Fulcao's eye begins to make a live, so everyone starts wondering what he's doing. But some came in with the sole purpose of loosening hate on his live. So it starts to walk out of nowhere, and it is said that streamer mode is a functionality within the game so users can stream. It is a functionality that can be used by any player in Chrono Life. During the day of the final judgment was not used by the Union of the World Guild, so that the operation was a success, and so far the identity of the sought-after has not yet been revealed, so he says he goes
About
straight
the
to the
PvP
point of a 3 million ass, and he asks if they think that really would be possible. And he says that of course he saw the company's warning board, saying it's not bug or hack, but he wonders if they really could believe it, especially when the game company only sees them as dogs and pigs. Then everyone starts freaking out with that crazy screaming. Then he asks them to take a look at the complaints. He begins to ask how there could be a monster who can delete characters. And in that he calls everyone that he had this character deleted to join his stream, because he is currently tracking that monster, and he says he will expose everything today, and his live is focused on the investigation of this loose monster. Jaiwoo is the only one who is doing something useful facing that monster, and the monster is still unharmed after his attack. So Jaiwoo says he's very amazing, because he can't believe he avoided all those blows, and asks where he came from. He presents himself as Huracan, and his only purpose is to annihilate humanity, and he is the strongest boss and the lost head of Gold. So Gold says he knew, because he felt a familiar presence at that time, and thought it was the pity of his imagination. And in that he asks Jiyu, be careful, as it may have been the reason for the valley monsters to have disappeared, and it may also be the reason for Captain Love to have died earlier. And when Jiyu hears that, he starts to get angry, and Hirakayo keeps saying he will kill, and goes over the boy. And Jiyu, in turn, is completely sad for the character of Love to have been deleted, and when the monster comes close to him, he just stops him with his cock, activating your non-lethal attack, which this time manages to hit the Eric and hard. And Fulcao's eye keeps running to the place, sending everyone on, because he is approaching that commotion and will take a very close look. Meanwhile, Jiwu continues to give several non-lethal attacks on Huracan, and he even tries to attack, but he can't do so much. Jiu, in turn, uses his non-lethal attack continuous attack version, and so he begins to attack several times the Huracan, and begins to come out of oil from his mouth. Meanwhile, the Fulcao's eye is from afar, amazed at what is seeing. After all, that wanted is defeating the monster. And the Fulcao's eye remembers all the humiliation he went through, and he wonders why his worst enemy would be there at that worst moment. Then he added to his bow, pointing to the boy, and he says that by his fault, he started to lose everything. Meanwhile, Jiyu finally defeats Jiyu. The Huracan, with its horns, breaks up totally, and the live people see a bright dust coming out of Huracan and ask what that is. But one of them says that he was able to recover his character, and they all start recovering, while the boy defeats him. And the Fulcao's eye does not want to believe it. After all, the Quera saved everyone, and it is said that the stolen souls returned to their owners, and the Huracan level was reduced, and the skills points were also reduced. So he returns to his initial form, at level 7 grade in 20-3. In this skill, I ask what happened. After all, at first, he was dodging his attacks on good. So why did he get slower? And soon Urus says that the energy he absorbed returned to his original owners. And the man in charge of Chronolive is all happy. After all, the characters were not eliminated. They were only transferred to the Horn of Huracan. And the president says yes, after all he should know that, since he is the leader of the development team. But he says he is the leader of the design team. So he was mistaken for a little more bald. And Gio, in turn, is all happy. After all, if he defeats that guy, Captain Amor will also return. However, Huracan begins to get angry, calling him insignificant food. Then he again launches his continuous attack, non-lethal version, and soon hit the Huracan full. And it is said that the stolen soul returned to its owner, and his level has been reduced by several times. He begins to lose all the status he has gained, and in that, his level falls vertiginously. Meanwhile, people keep watching the guy who defeated the 3 million, and he begins to say that they should not be cheering for him, but some start to get cloth. After all, because of him, he managed to recover his character, and so, the hawk no longer is against him, lowering his bow and giving expired. And there in her building, Love finally discovers that everything she was passing by the tucked was just a pretense. After all, the guy is very, very strong indeed. And she watches this during the live, and Huracan falls completely destroyed on the floor, and he returns to the level of 180. And in that, Jiwu looks from above, with Urus saying that all the energy of his body is gone, and he returned to his original form. And Jiwu zoa him, saying that you can see only by appearance, and asks if they should end it soon. However, Urakan, even defeated, still tries to use his last trick, trying to suck the vitality of the proto. And everyone who was watching it starts to get scared. After all, he managed to preach that tube on Joe's body, and Huracan begins to be happy, saying that he is a creature that will annihilate humanity, and it starts to give the giga as it sucks everything from the proto. So he raises even stronger. And it is said that he absorbed the target level, and absorbed a lot, and in this skill drops the stick to fall to the floor. And Hiraka's horn begins to grow again, and he freaks out with happiness, saying that food is very hot, and he says it's the first time eating something so tasty, and he reaches the RP level. And he thinks that this is not yet enough, because his hunger will never be satiated. And he is Huracan, the goal, and Urus, in turn, begins to cry next to the twig. But then the hidden skill, Healing Factor, is activated and the damage parts are regenerated. And in that, Jewel begins to grow in the belly of Gold, and when he sees that inflatable balloon on his belly, he begins to cry. And Geo leaves from inside the most terrifying way possible. And when his neck is completely out, he turns his head and gives a macabre smile looking at the Huracan and starts freaking out seeing it. So after putting his head out, he starts laughing, and almost no one can believe what you see. And it begins to ask yourself what that is. And even the goddess of life is looking at that horrible thing. And he starts laughing more and more, saying this is fun, because he feels like he has become a worm. And in that, Urus asks if he is still him, and he says he is. It continues to say that it is a creature that exists only to annihilate humanity, While he remains in this same baby and performing, Jaiwoo takes this worm from the devil to his face, and it comes very close, growing even more, and Urus can't look at that thing, and Huracan begins to feel pain seeing it, until Jaiwoo's foot touches the floor, and he begins to absorb the Huracan, which is said that his ability will heal all the damage received immediately. And in the activation of the healing factor, all absorbed cells are restored to the original owner. Then the Geo, hey, and hence if he is the collar Huracan, which is explained that most of his cells have completely merged with Huracan's cells. And in that he begins to absorb the monster, until finally, Huracan completely enters the underwear. And it is said that Huracan was also absorbed due to the healing factor. And the animal, after starring in one of the most bizarre scenes of all the morning I've read so far, gives a crank like Samson's. And so, he gets another hidden ability, called the collar. And it absorbs the level and status of something when eating it. And in that thing of life is wondering if it is over, because that's not what she expected, but until it was fun. And in that she notices that she really looks happy, even though she just lost her son, calling her a cheap mother. And she says he is very evil, but says it was all metaphorical. And she asks if he really thinks she gave birth to something like that. And he says that, for his information, she is only 20-1 years, and they are the same age. And in that, he keeps wondering how she knows his age in the real world. And she doesn't respond, just invoking her scepter and smiles at him, giving an ambiguous answer. One will know. And so she opens a slit in space, and simply from the inside comes a hand from a huge monster, and she says she sees her around, still calling him a losing lord. The director of Corona Life tells them to solve it, post a warning, and make an event with quick rewards. And they also tell them to keep monitoring what he ordered earlier. And he remembers talking about Huracan and says this is fun, and from now on he orders to focus on the movement of two characters. One is Huracan, and the other is Luna. In this, the whole city is happy, cheering Jaiwoo as a hero. And everyone starts greeting him, who doesn't like the fame she's getting at all. After all, they recognize their strength, and the plan to hide the force was completely cancelled. And the live broadcast of the Falcao I had a peak 230-4,580-2 people online simultaneously, and the transmission clips were scattered throughout various communities such as YouTube. But then, one of the NPCs begins to ask how they may be cheering that guy, because he is a PK who has killed 3, recently, and begins to say that he is a sought-after pattern for crazy dogs and pigs. In the end, then the Falcao I arrives asking if he thinks sinning is the same as deleting character. He should stop talking shit. Then he begins to defend the crazy. After all, it was he who benefited the most of this incident. And he starts trying to bring Jaiwoo to his guild. And noticing that the guy doesn't have a guild, everyone starts harassing him quickly. And in that Jaiwoo runs out. And I whore it to him, noting that he was very popular. And he says he should have stopped hiding his power much earlier. But Ju tells him to silence his mouth, because he doesn't want that kind of attention. While he is running, he hits facing something, and he keeps wondering if he had a wall in the middle of the village. But then he realizes that he is a statue of his own, gold, naked and pose, and he doesn't like it at all than seeing. And he wonders what that is, being incredulous and not wanting to believe it is him. So the Urus says that he is obviously the crazy, and the crazy king of Guild Ralikeo appears with everyone in a QC just like him, asking if the boy liked it, because it was worth spending that fortune to make this tribute. And he says he really liked the boy's performance last time. And as he thought, he really was that guy. And he remembers when he confirmed that he was the man who killed 3 million people. And he says that after that day, he was so impressed that he built that statue for him. Nils is like this in reaction and also asks why they're using only underwear, asking his other items. So he says he used everything to build that statue, saying that thing cost more than 20 billions. And with that, other people also find the boy, and the number of freaks following it only increases, and he tries to get lost in everyone. Meanwhile, Hansaranga is in his room, half-headed, for discovering everything that way. And she says it should be obvious, because the disappearance of the monsters at the moment she opened her eyes, and the rabbit that was crushed with a single blow, even the fists that were stolen by the Halasan Guild, the Quakinha must have given him after defeating the guild. And she asks why he did that, and why did you pretend to be weak? And she keeps wondering if he deceived her. And with that, a traumatic memory of her childhood comes to light, and she starts to get more and more scared, needing to get her glasses to get a little safer, while trembling deep in her room. Jaiwoo is staring at the consequences of being famous, and he wonders if this is how he is the life of famous people. And Urus notes that there are still a lot of people staring there, and in that he asks Horus if it doesn't look like they forgot something, and he says he forgot something important. And in that he sees Love in front of him, and he asks if she already baked. And he says that it is not surprising that he has felt alone. And he says he thinks it was because she wasn't there. And in that, everyone starts asking who this girl is. After all, the hero is calling her captain. They say they are not sure, because it is the first time they see her, so they think even she looks pretty familiar. And they say that the face is familiar too. And in that, he says he got her something, delivering the scarf she had lost again. And he says he got it after killing the hurricane. And he even tries to lie, saying he caught the way there. And he thinks he is still hiding his powers of love. And he says he found it on the floor, but when he hears him lying, she starts asking him not to laugh, because that's not true, and she asks why he's lying, and he tries to get in Miguel saying he doesn't know how lying, and she gets more and more annoyed, seriously with him, asking if it wasn't him, the guy who gave rice cake in his house, and he even tries not to say no, but remembers what happened to her in real life, and she is surprised to recap everything that is happening and asks if she is that, and she confirms that yes, she is Han Sarong. And when her manager discovers that the girl revealed herself in front of so many people, asks if she got crazy. After all, she ended up in the most spoken affairs on the internet, and is already a buzz with several journalists asking for interviews, and it also has several rumors without fundamentals spreading to various communities. She also says that the girl customized her character with the look of real life. She asks if the girl thinks before doing something, and in that it is said about customizing. It is a function used to change the character's appearance in the game, but in virtual reality one can only enter games with real appearance due to a government policy. And she says that the girl should at least have changed her hairstyle, and says it was a miracle she has not been discovered so far, but she says she didn't care about being discovered. They hide first, and she asks if it is by chance it's sin to play games, and asks why you have to hide your identity, and she says she plays to have fun. So why does she have to care about other people? And the manager says she asked her to do this because she is afraid of her true personality to be revealed, and asks if the girl has forgotten that she is pretending in front of the nation. However, she says that in the first place, she never wanted to pretend, and it was she who forced him to do that. She says that at first she said she didn't want to lie because she hates deceiving her fans, and that she leaves knocking on the door and running, and then lies down by putting your VR, that while cries. And going back to the past, we see that she already sang well in her childhood, and it is said that Han Sarong has found her talent with music since she was a child. And surprisingly, she debuted in the music industry with just 5 years. And they always treated her as a being with a lot of talent, and it is said that her debut was more glorious than anyone's. But then, a tragic happened as if he were waiting, and the flower that should flourish gloriously was trampled by filthy and corporate adults, and soon by those who should protect her the most, her parents. And of course, the reason is money. And it could be said that it is a common problem that could be seen throughout the entertainment industry. A tragedy that ruined a child's life, as if she were a typical drama character. Simple as that. Han Sarong suffered cruelly overwork, various music programs, interviews, a variety of programs, many commercial recordings, and other things. And the reason she can deal with such a hard agenda that not even an adult could deal with is ironically because of her parents. So they ask the girl if there is a problem, and ask if she can do better than that, and say they still love her. In this, she strained herself, gives a yellow smile. But the child's small body quickly reached its limit. But then, still on stage, she begins to collapse. On extreme pressure at the end of the show, she begins to vomit on the stage. In this, she goes very bad, crying and shouting to her parents. But they just look from afar, disappointed with her. So the child received a wound that could never forget. And right in the game, she's still with her, until the Quainha finally goes to her. And he says something told her that she would be there, and asks why she ran out of nowhere, but she tells him to disappear. So he asks Urus what her problem is. And Urus says it looks like she's angry with him, and he keeps wondering why. And Urus says that his Ryung really doesn't understand women, and he says she is angry because he deceived, hiding his power. Then he asks what he does now. However, Urus says he needs to apologize, since lying to her was wrong. So he comes close to her, asking for a very dry excuses, and says he really didn't intend to deceive her from the beginning, but somehow, he thought of telling him someday. But no good time appeared. And in that she gets up, asking if he thinks he will end up with the apology. And she says he apologized very easily, so he pretends not to understand. However, the girl is taken by a monster in front of her. Nils, the man on that section, wonders if she got it very strongly, and he says he didn't want her to pass out. And Urus apparently knows that guy, but Ju keeps asking who he is, sending him back. Then he apologizes to Mr. Hero, because there are people who want to meet Miss Harang now, and he says he will borrow it for a while. And in that he gets very pissed to see that. However, Urose says that he cannot attack without thinking of warning who is that guy, but Geo doesn't even try to hear, and it already gives your attack up. So the attack goes to that man mounted on the kiss, but he doesn't look at all nervous, and simply activates his skill, 8 views, activating 5th view reflection, and in that, the attack returns to Hyung. And equal to every attack he gives, he also gets out of the stratosphere and is behind a gigantic brand, and Hyung loses his arm in this counterattack. And in that, Urus asks if he is okay. And it is said that he has received a critical wound, and the hidden healing factor ability will be activated, and in this his arm grows again, while Ryung seems to be very pissed, and Urose asks if he realized now, because that person is not an ordinary human, and he says that the name of that guy is Hayback, the god of water. And Urose says that this man is an existence like his. However, Jaiwoo says that if he is equal to him, he should be a weakness. And Urose doesn't like it at all. However, that man who reflected the attack quite easily has his broken mirror, which he used to reflect the attack. And he says Jaiwoo is really amazing. And he says he is the first to break it after that person. And he says it will take a long time to fix it. However, he is a mere human, and so, he does not deserve to possess the peace of God. And in the West Forest, in the Hidden Tower, Harang ends up waking up and asks that shit is that, and also asks who he is, questioning where she is and why he brought him. In this, he asks her to calm down, saying he has no more intentions. And there are people who want to meet her, but she asks who these would be, and in that they arrive, and she gets quite scared, noting that these are her father and mother. And when she sees her parents, all the trauma she has gone through. And it is said that after that day, Han Sarung decided to retire from his career as a singer. However, there was someone who would never give up on Han Sarung, and those would be his parents. Her parents were already beating the girl. After all, they denied her retirement and forced her back to the stage. And her mother asks if the girl doesn't understand why they are doing it. And she says it's because they love her. And the girl is very scared, trembling, and already with a red cheek. And in this, 4 years, Han Sarung lived his life without being able to retire. But when their income was completely cut, her parents had already passed the boundary. And she thinks that those people didn't deserve to be called parents, that they sold the only child they had. Then the girl took that moment to run, saying that was a miracle. And it was a true miracle. Han Sarung managed to escape it. And the place where the little girl arrived was the police. And it is said that so, Han Sarung finally broke free from his years of hell. And the court placed a protective measure against Han Sarung's parents. And her parents tried to appeal, but of course it didn't work. And thanks to the protection of the law, she was completely free from her parents. However, Han Sarung was already mentally broken, and the girl was already carrying that trauma, an intense trauma about lies. And since then, Han Sarung has not left his room, and his only escape at the time was online games, spending his time alone in the dark room, and her eyes quickly deteriorated, and then she had to start wearing glasses. And because of the memory of these days, if she removes her glasses, she is still anxious. In real life, and the day she left the world once again will be told a little later, while she is face to face with her parents, shaking, and she asks how they are there, and also asks the protective measure. And they say they are in a game, and they went there after reading an article saying she played Chrono Life. But still, it's hard to find her alone. And he says he is happy, because that person helped them this time. And he says that there is no need, saying that it will leave a little, asking them to talk freely. And in that he leaves the three alone, and her mother says she grew up a lot, and says she always sees her on TV, but it's really cool to see her, even if it's virtual reality. She says that the world is very cruel because they have separated their parents from their daughter using the law. And in this the girl begins to have more and more anxiety. She asks what they want, because if it's nothing, she can simply go down. And her mother says she feels a lot. They wanted to apologize for a while. And she says that day they were too hard. And he says he feels very really. I don't know, see? Then it has a 3-note face. Braba's lie. And in that, her mother asks if she could forgive them, for if possible, they want to have a happy life with her once again, as in the old days. And as she speaks, that bunch of fool, that crazy is out, along with her bird. And he realizes that Jaiwoo has arrived. And in that he's very pissed off. And Man says that this is a place that was kept secret from people. But he thinks I have guided him there. And before he kept talking a lot of things, Yu tells him to shut up and says that now they will fight again, because even if he wins, he will only be relieved after he has his just part of revenge. And in that, the man says he has nothing to do, cracking his finger, and so that emphasis begins to fly. And Geo asks if the bird's head will be the first, and asks how he dared to be arrogant with the primate, but the bird is divided into 2, and he thinks he's hallucinating. After all, the bird has multiplied in several of them, so he thinks it's really a copy pasta. And Man says that this is the 4th vision, photocopy. And in that they all attack Ryong together. And he keeps wondering what that is. However, he only shakes his cock to one side and the other, killing all monsters. However, they do not stop being invoked. So Jaiwoo asks who is that guy. And Ura says that this is photocopy, Habak's 4th ability, and he ordered him to be careful, because the Habak mirror skill is called 8 visions. And he says that this means that 8 mirrors, and each level between the 1st and the 8th vision has one different effect. He says that, for example, that skill he got before is reflection, and reflects every physical and magical attack. Elias, Jaiwoo, says this is very stolen and asks if they won't balance that game. And bro, my face is exactly the face of Urus looking at this kid. And the Cove is asking what is with him. And Urus says it is nothing. And he says he just thinks it's kind of absurd to hear him talking about balancing. And he says that even if there is no balance, it doesn't matter. And he says no. In fact, The company never intended to balance the game to start conversation, since he is not a user, but a boss who needs to be defeated. So Jaiwa says this is a very funny game, because he is saying that the boss is walking around while pretends to be human. He wonders who was the animal who had this idea, but then the emphasis on his back, and Otis begins to throw fireballs on Geo, which is hit by all of them, and he says that it's scared a lot, and begins a sequence of continuous cuts that again comes out of the stratosphere. And Habak says this is useless, because no matter how many he kills, he can continue making copies as he wants with photocopy. And in this several other emphasis on. So Jaiwu asks if it's serious, and wonders whether to crush that mirror. And he aims at his continuous cut towards all those monsters several times, and it's still it for a long time, until the mirror begins to crack and Rabbit gets scared, but soon the stick to his face, and Jaiwu asks if he is cracking, calling him a boss Rabbit, and says he heard he is the same Urus, so he knows he is. But he says he is not, that he is weak. He thinks he who is normal there, because he did not expect the boy to be so strong. Alyssa Jaiwu tells him not to talk to that little smile, because it makes him pissed because it reminds a certain cockroach. And the boy tells him to answer him if he doesn't want to die. Asks why he kidnapped Captain Love, and what he means with the peace of God. And in that he says he is not sure whether he should answer or not. And then Gil asks if he really prefers to die, and send him to stay there. Malabar is that it says it is almost broken. However, it can use it once more. And Nielsen arrived and asks if it's that bird head again. But someone says it's annoying, and he is scared of that, because he's seeing a doppelganger of him in front of him, and he realizes that he has another of him appearing. And this copy prepares to attack it, using Etrock or Nitnock. Yes, he's talking continuously, on the contrary. And in that, he attacks Jiwook and sees that he gave a lot of shit being attacked by his own attack. And he really dies. And after Doppelganger hit him, even Habak is surprised, saying that if he knew that, he would have sent only the hero's copy several times instead of the emphasis on. And then, Urus asks his purpose, and he begins to greet the monster, saying that it was bad for not greeting him, because he was very busy. And he even speaks that he looks cuter than before, having his mouth shut up and stops sending the subject. Then he asks what he wants, appearing in front of Jiyu, and he questions him if it was because that person sent. In this, he gets serious, but asks again to tighten the cheeks of gold. And in that, something under them begins to make a noise, and a dough of meat begins to regulate. And it's really who you think it's. And Urus soon wonders if the horror game is starting again. And the healing factor is activated with Jiwoo returning to life in the worst possible way again, and a hand coming out of the guy's groin. Man, I can't describe how horrible this scene is. And from that hand that is coming out of Jiho's groin, there is a face in her, and he's smiling and saying hi to Habak. Then he runs scared. And someone calls him, and when he looks in the version, hand, is the fake little Kwakinha. However, Gold says he seems to be much more fake than the other that way he is. After all, he looks like the experiment that went wrong. But in that he gets angry, sending him to shut up. Then Doppelganger prepares to use another blow, Arop, Epigal, or Shurabe. And in this he opens another crater on the floor. And Jaiwu keeps looking at that. Then finish raising yourself. And he strikes up on that thing. And so, with these two gigantic powers colliding, a fusion of energy begins to leave the planet. They continue to battle, facing each other. So they clash. And a cable of war begins to see who will be first. Then he uses the continuous cut skill along with Doppelgang. And they are still in this until one hits the other's head. And the explosion it generates is gigantic. And soon, two amoebas begin to squirm on the floor, and their healing factor is activated. And that before horror movie begins to replicate in 2 parts. So Habak asks that even if the two are not crazy, they really need to recover that way. And when they return to active, they start battle again. And so, that show of horrors that is the battle of the two begins to happen. And Urus says he must be time for him to answer him, and asks why he is preventing Jiyu. And why did you kidnap Captain Love? And he says that, as expected, Urus knows nothing, and he says he told him to pay attention to others. Not even that person can act carefully with him. The strongest being of Chronolife, the superb Urus, he says he would also like to ask one thing, not just that person. He, who has never had any interest in the world, why are you following that mere human? So he asks if Rabbit can't see just looking, and Habaiki changes the subject, saying that, anyway, he thinks Urose understood several wrong things, so he can rest assured, because he has no interest in Guo, and his goal is just God's peace. So he asks if he's talking about Captain Amor, and he questions what I use is talking about, and why the Captain Love would be the peace of God, and he says that never that a human would have such a value. And he says Han Sarung is merely the 9th of God's peace, and she is still there being manipulated by her parents, and her mother grabs her arm talking about her beautiful daughter, and asks where are the silence gauntlets, while making a bizarre face. And Urose finally discovers that the leggings of the Captain Love are a piece of God. However, he is in doubt, After all, this costs only 10 million gold. So Habak says the price is not important, but he says that soon the price will be affordable for normal players. And the items in Chrono Life were divided into several ranks. The first, the negligible items of normal rank. The second, the rare rank. The third, the unique rank. And lastly, the Newman rank. And he says he also heard that there is still a transcendent rank after this, but never saw
But
real. Urus says he, in turn, saw. So he says that regardless of strength or rarity, God's peace is very special, although the transcendent rank is an exception, especially for the gods. And Luna begins to say that she doesn't believe Habak has already revealed everything about twists, and she says that a man who doesn't eat silent is not at all attractive. And in that she confirms with that Bayman who says he is God, and he says he is nothing new, because everyone is already knowing, and he says that she was also collecting the pieces of God since before, and he remembers the everything she went through the Halasan Gilda, and she says that, as expected of him, he already knew everything, and he says she didn't think the Huracan would be able to absorb the peace of God, and she says she pretended to be. But the result was a little different from what she was expecting. And while they get gossipy, Jaiwoo continues to battle himself and take a hell of a choke, until Doppelganger makes a movement that takes his twig from Jaiwoo's twig. He can hit him quickly using it, hitting his chest and tearing down half a world, and Rose is surprised by it. And Habak says that his status and control are identical, but of course there is a fatal difference, and that would be the difference between a user and a bot. Unlike the hero's copy will not commit any mistake of control due to fatigue. And he says that the tide will probably change. And in that, Urus begins to run to his master, and he's really over. And the healing factor once again begins, and he starts to get excited, saying this is a lot of fun. And none of them can understand what is going on. And the crazy says that all this time has been so boring, as he could overthrow all his opponents with just one blow. And he says he doesn't want to kill the fake little Kyuk. He wants to keep playing with him. And Nesses are not understanding what is going on. For this situation now, it should be quite dangerous. But Geo keeps wondering, what would be in danger? After all, he's having a lot of fun, for there are two ways of his ending that monster, and everyone is surprised, stuck with it. And in that, they again shock their severe. The explosion happens again, and in this, Urus begins to be hit, just like everyone else. And Habak is curious to know these two ways he has to defeat Doppelganger, and he wonders what method he will use to raid him. So Luna begins to say that he is bluffing. So he says compared to other bosses in Chrono Life, Habak is on another level, and his ability of 8 visions is stolen. And he is not a boss made to be sold, and she says he doubts that he can defeat him. So he says that the first method is to destroy the planet. And so Luna notices that it can really work, and she looks like Taja. He says that if he destroys the planet and end the game as last time, Captain Amor would return to the initial village, and this false Kyuk would disappear. But he says he is not in the mood to do this, and asks if he should test something new. So the two who were accompanying from afar are slightly relieved, and the director is also hoping for him to use the 2 method, please asking that he is certainly the one who is most anxious about everything that is going on. Then Hansarang's mother begins to ask where the gauntlet is, making a damn psychopathic face, sending her daughter honest with mom, because she will not be angry. And in that she starts to be scared. And the mother says Habak said this will get a lot of money if they get it for him. They are not even asking for real money from her. She asks if she can do at least that for her mother, and still says that it was they who brought her into the world, and she could at least do that. So she says she doesn't know, because she lost them for a while. And in that, the father appears next to her, asking where she hid. But she begins to deny having hidden, starting to cry. And then her father hits the girl's face, calling her ungrateful brat and not stop, saying that they tried to endure and overcome when she ran away, and he says she is a waste of money to her parents, and asks if she forgot who gave her the light, exchanged her diapers, fed her, and even put her to sleep from everything they did for her, and asks where your money is, calling the daughter bitch off shit. And this father really deserves the title of worst existing father of all the works I've ever seen. And in that, Ryung continues his battle against himself and wonders that light is that under him. Urus wonders if it is a new ability of his master, but Habak notes that not and begins to think that this violet spirit is something he has seen. Then Huracan appears, and he says he will use the skill. And he, as always, does it as worse as possible, expelling a tentacle phimosis of his mouth while he laughs psychopathic. And for sure, Urus is the character who represents me most in this whole manat, right from the mouth. Then he digs that in the neck of the tank too, and begins to suck him. So Habaiki wonders if that is the plan, and he hopes that Ju has not believed that his clones could not copy the gluttony. So it really is the copy, and one starts to suck the other. In this, Hibiki says the opponent is a reflection that mirrors you. And as he has the gluttony, in addition to the cure and battery factor, he would also have. He says he should really have tried the first method, and his strategy failed. Then he starts equipping the reserve battery, and Hibiki is not understanding. But soon it is hit by the sting too and wonders what is going on, and starts to be sucked, so Ju says that his second attack is to screw with the main body, and in that it begins to be sucked, and he wonders when he launched the tentacle, and realizes that trying to absorb the clone from the beginning was a scam, and in that he really sucked entirely, so the Kyuche disappears for lack of strength. And Jae-woo says that he knew that if the main body suffered the fatal wound, the clone would disappear. And he says it was quite fun. And this encounter has two ridiculous sections coming out of the mouth, and send him a cherry. And Hibiki still reacts, cutting that tentacle. And Jehovah is surprised by his tenacity. And Hibiki takes one more of his spats, calling him bastard, saying he didn't think he would be cornered. He says it's a shame, but has no choice. He will have to give up the peace of God, the gauntlets of silence. And so that God whose self-proclaimed wonders if God's peace was not absorbed by Huracan. And he asks if Hibiki didn't know that. And Luna says no, she didn't tell him. And he realizes that this girl really is the Tinos. And Hibiki then begins to levitate, saying he will back down for now. In this, Jae-woo swallows the thick and asks how he dares to leave, wondering if he is just a loser who was allowed to escape. So he holds firmly the wood, and Hibiki says he is. The loser should run with the tail between his legs, and in that he throws his mirror into Ju's hand. And he receives the Hibiki mirror, the king's hand mirror of the mirrors. It has one of the skills of the 8 visions imbued with it. And Rose is surprised to see this. After all, he gave him that, and Hibiki asks him please accept and think about it as a reward for having left Raid. And he says that this is not even a formal reward, but he thinks he will spare you if he gives it. And Ju asks why he should spare him for giving him that. And he wonders if he couldn't get more legitimate items if he killed him. So Rabik says he has a good point, but that way he will make the devil cry. So he says he needs to be alive for this mirror to work. He says that instead of killing him, leaving him alive would be better to him. So he says he goes in this. And so the possession of the mirror of Rabik changed. Egu is his new owner. And he says he does so much. After all, his goal was the Captain Love, not the Mirror Man. And already inside with the Captain Love, her father continues to hit the girl, asking if she knows the suffering they went through. And he says she should listen to her mirror obediently. And now she's being a rebel. And in that the girl begins to remember everything that is past. And after catching too much, she fell to the floor with her back to her father. So he says that's right. Now that it has arrived in this, they don't need the silence gauntlet. From now on, they can just take the money with. So she is completely broken and says she can't take it anymore. And her mother says this is just a game and none of that is real. So the protective measure of the court doesn't work there. And she says the girl doesn't, you may not even escape them now. And in that she starts preparing. While your mother says your family will be united forever. Then she begins to ask someone to break free from this hell. And in that, the Kyuche arrives, saying she can just stop playing the game. And the girl's mother is asking who he is, how he dared to interrupt them. And so she realizes that the Kyuche is there. And her father says that stopping to think, he would be that guy in the video who was touching his daughter, but he doesn't even think much and gives the girl's father using the ability to beat without killing, it falls backwards. He says that even if he is normally rude, he is at least educated with the elders. However, selfish thiazons that are not even an exception. And so he gets very pissed off. But Urose thinks he was informal with everyone in the Holosan Guild, and the girl's father keeps cursing him, saying he is Sarung's father. So he refuses to believe that they are their father. After all, in what world parents beat their children and reversing their money? So the mother says he may ask Sarung himself that they really are his parents, but he says he hates it, bringing reality to a game. And he asks what the sense of playing video game is like. In this, she starts stuttering, saying that is why children who play video games are like this today. Then he speaks to the Captain Love, asking why she is sitting after they hit him like this, and she is not understanding that. And he tells her not to hold on and go with everything, because her level is the greatest. And so she finally wakes up, but she keeps saying that they really are her parents. And he says it's a hell of a disgust, because she's being realistic in a game, and ends up calling the pathetic girl, and saying that looking at the situation he knows what kind of family they are. But if you're going to play with a loser, why is she playing? And asks if she will escape that she didn't even do in real life. And she gets angry, asking what the Quainha knows. After all, he knows nothing. And she starts to cry, saying she's been holding all this time. And so her mother beats the girl again, asking how so, and saying that they were the one who were holding on. Whether in reality or in the game, they are still your parents, your first and only parents. However, the girl starts to get more and more angry, and Ju says she can't believe she just beat her. And he says she is really insensitive. And it gives a goodbye, because Captain Love has a lot of strength. And he says that even without any weapons in his own hands, his punches will hurt. And the girl really chips her, remembering everything that went well in her mother's face. And after that day, she tells the entire press that she was enjoying the Chronolife. And so, the presenter says that this is unexpected, and wonders if Chronolife is not a very realistic game, and based on her personality, she cannot release from. Not even kill a rabbit. And she says that of course she can. Filling the monsters with pissing to death is kind of relief from stress for her. I believe Han Sarung has completely overcome his trauma and now lives comfortably. The anxiety that was disturbing she also disappeared totally, and she no longer has to wear her glasses. The presenter says that fucking to death is the complete opposite of how it is normally. However, she says she is not the opposite. For maybe as she is in the game, who she really is. And everyone is amazed at her words. She says who cares about these things? Who she is really. And it really matters? She says she's looking for reality in a game. Has no reason to play games then. And the Pescatapa that made this change happen, wondering if it's because of Hansarang's legal and honest response. Because she has a lot more fan than before, and everyone is supporting her. And he says he is also supporting her as a fan. And he says he is a fan of idol Han Sarung, who surpassed his trauma and left the world of games. And he lived happy in reality. And so, he logs in Chronolife. And once again she starts hitting the boy saying he's late. And asks if he became a habit that he gets late. And also asks if he's wanting to die. And he says he came after watching her interview. And asks if she's not on the station now. And she says that this is a recorded interview. And he says Hansarang has not stopped playing, even after overcoming his trauma. No, instead, now she is going more and more. And from what he heard, her schedule has been reduced by 3 times to play games or something. And in that, she begins to send him. He asks where, and she says this is annoying, asking if he will be questioning all the details. And he still says he looks like he forgot, because she didn't accept her apologies. And in that he agrees with her, and she gives that naughty smile, saying that you will make an exception this time and forgive you. And he says that this time he will carry you. And he keeps wondering why that, and remembers all the beginning of his story together, with him pretending to be noob to her. And this time she says that she is actually a noob, and you don't know anything. Then it comes close to him, and asks him please carry you, calling the master boy. And at that moment, his twig appeared elsewhere. So it is said that in Chronolife, due to the large number of players, there are many guilds there. And among all the guilds, the best are nicknamed the top 5 guilds. And all the 5 best guilds have their own strength and peculiarity, which make them worthy of the reputation. However, there is a guild that took a completely different path from the others, and they have a great intelligence network, surpassing World Guild, as well as a scope of long-range operations that covers the entire continent. All members of this guild are from the rogue class. It's Guild Robin Hood, and Guild Robin Hood is known as one of the top 5 guilds worthy of praise. However, she was annihilated in just one night, and the author of this case is wearing a ridiculous mask looking under the moon. And Nestle simply jumps from the cliff, running out. So someone appears on his side, asking if there is still a living mouse. And Nestle tries to hit that man with a stupid cut. Instead of keeping half of his severed body, he says that this guy is better than the others, so he disappears in the air, and the masking is wondering, what is that? For the impact of death is strange. And in that, the man appears behind him, patting him with his sword, and says that he is still around their last, while he was close to dying, keeps asking who is that guy, and why he is doing it. And he says this is obvious. So you mask like the man who is dying, and says he's doing it because it's fun. And so it finishes killing the man. And on a road with a cat with horn carrying a wagon, the man says he is already there, talking to his customers, saying they will arrive at the Rocky Mountain dungeon soon. So Geo asks if they arrived, as it is much closer than he imagined. And Love says that by the map you can see that it is quite close. And she says they will get there in about 5 minutes. And he says that this thing they are using is a popular Chronolife transport service. Carriage MYL. He says the evil cat that inhabited the evil world was tamed and brought into the human world. And so, he learned to pull carriages. And surprisingly, the founder of this service is a user who has the tamer profession. And the success and expansion of the carriage business MYL made it more profit than most small business owners. So Love says that they have come and say that it is very big indeed. So he says the place where they are going now is the Rocky Mountain Dungeon. It is basically a gigantic stone pillar that rises to the clouds.
He says he is a huge dungeon in a single stone that reaches up to 1,200 meters above the sea. And several monsters with medium level 30 appear there.
And there are a lot of monsters, so it has one of the most popular hunting soils for novice users, as they can increase faster
But
there.
he says that is what he heard because he was never there. And he says that level 7 was the end of his experience rising in the game.
And he says that this was a very long introduction.
And the reason they are there is to carry it.
And he says that at that time she was talking more seriously than he thought, so somehow he ended up in this situation, but wonders if he must carry it to what level. And he says this is a bag, wondering if the best go to the nest of gold, and the level of it to the maximum.
Then he sees her stirring her hair and says she prepared a gift for her. And she keeps wondering why a gift out of nowhere, and in that he opens his box item, invoking the transcendental handles.
And in that he says that the last time he returned her scarf, he realized he forgot the gauntlets.
And since he has those, he thought of giving her as a gift.
And in that the girl begins to cry, saying that she had not received a gift for a long time. So he asks if she's serious, because she's a famous idol, so she should get several fans' gifts. And she asks if her precious fans are the same as him. So he says he is certainly not. But it is despising, and she thinks it's really obvious that he is not the same as them. After all, surely something is going on. So she thanks him, as she will make good use of them. And she notices once again that, stopping to think, she doesn't know the name of his character. And he asks if he didn't tell him the name. And she says no, because she saw the last time they formed the team. But it has forgotten. So when he was going to speak the name of his character, the carriage breaks, and the meow cat begins to get up. So the man asks if they are okay, saying the cat was scared of nowhere. And from what I can see, their situation is a little tasty. So Jayu keeps wondering what happened, asking if you get the dead well. And she says yes, but when he sees where she's catching, Urus is completely without reaction. Then the cat again freaks out. So the man asks him to calm down, and asks what happened to him out of nowhere. But when he looks ahead, he has a semi-dead man on the way, and excuses, asking if they can help you. And so, all three are looking at him. So the man says he never heard of who he attacked, does not know his level, and even his class is a mystery. He just discovered the character's name, and he says he's just one thing. It is not any user, and it looks like he can copy items. And he expressed a copy of Carbon from his magic Heroi right in front of him. And in that he says that the character's name is a passive boy. And Love thinks you have never heard that name. And Urus, in turn, thinks of a butt with a Superman cover. So the game asks if you can ask him something.